Good morning, Kenzie.
Morning, Ed.
How are you doing?
Sorry, can people hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, great. Sorry, my computer was muted.
Good morning, Michelle, and good morning, Chantal as well.
And Candace, if you don't mind making me a host as well, so I can let some folks in.
Good morning, Council Bach, Council Flynn. Just wanted to say hello and hope you guys had a good morning.
Yeah, good morning. Nice to see you, Yusuf.
Good morning, Yusuf. It's good to see you. It's good to be with you.
Did you have a good Eid?
Yeah, I had a great Eid. Eid. You know, I didn't take off any time, honestly, for the last year, and so this was like my first week off. So it was awesome. It was great. Very needed.
Nice. So we're getting you refreshed.
Yeah, totally. Totally.
All right.
Good morning, Commissioner Shea.
Good morning, Counselor. Morning, everybody.
Good morning, everyone. This is Catalina.
Good morning, Catalina. It's good to see you.
Sorry, there's just got to get a bunch of people in. Here.
Good morning, Selena.
Morning, Counselor. Good to see you.
You too. You too. Thank you.
All right. So I think I'm just missing on the list I've got. I'm missing Evandro and Susan from HRC. I think I have everybody else on my list, Selena.
I'll reach out to them.
I've got Evandro just came. Great. Director Carvalho, are we waiting on Susan from your office, or are we good on your end?
We're good. Good morning.
Okay, great. Awesome. Fantastic. 1 second. Let me just remind colleagues that we're about to get started.
Good morning, Evandro. Good morning, Jennifer.
Good morning, Counselor Flynn.
Good morning. And I see my friend Francis there. Good morning, Francis.
Good morning, Councillor. How's this beautiful morning?
It is. It's a great morning. It's good to be with you, Francis.
Always a pleasure, Councillor.
Thank you. You too.
Yes.
All right. And Candace, we're ready to go, right? Okay. Great. I'm calling this hearing of the Boston City Council's Ways and Means Committee to order. For the record, my name is Kenzie Bach. I'm the District 8 City Councilor and also the Chair of Ways and Means. which is the council's committee that's tasked with overseeing the city budget process. This hearing is being recorded. It's being live streamed at boston.gov/city-council-tv and broadcast on Xfinity Channel 8, RCN Channel 82, and FiOS Channel 964. This budget review process encompasses about 35 working sessions and hearings. We are about halfway through at the moment. In this process, the council scrutinizes all kinds of departments, asks questions, and it's an opportunity for the public as well to testify. And so if you're interested in testifying, I encourage you to go to boston.gov/council-budget, where you can find the whole schedule. And if you go to boston.gov/budget-testify, that'll explain how to testify. You can also shoot us an email with your testimony or to sign up at ccc.wm. That's ccc.wm@boston.gov. There's also a way on the site to upload a video of yourself, so we can actually attach that to the recording of the relevant hearing. And then we have 2 remaining hearings that are going to be dedicated purely to public testimony. So there's one on May 25th at 6 p.m. focused on this BPS budget, and one on June 3rd at 6 p.m. about any aspect of the budget. So we do hope you'll come along and testify, or tweet us your questions informally using the hashtag #BossBudget. That's BOS budget. Today's hearing is on docket 0524 to 0526, orders for the FY22 operating budget, including annual appropriations for departmental operations for the school department and for other post-employment benefits. Dockets 0527 to 0528, orders for capital fund transfer appropriations, and docket 0529 to 0531, orders for the capital budget, including loan orders and lease purchase agreements. And that's the whole sum of budget orders that are before the council, but the actual focus of this hearing today will be a bunch of our smaller but mighty departments. So the Office of Food Access, the Office of Language and Communications Access, the Office of Immigrant Advancement, the Human Rights Commission, and the Age Strong Commission. And what these departments have in common is that they were recipients of significant budget bumps in last year's budget in relationship to the redistribution of funds out of the police budget. And although we didn't achieve the economies in the police budget that we had hoped to, these increases for these departments did go forward. And in a number of cases, there are also significant additional investments going into this coming budget year in FY22 proposed budget. So, I think these are all departments that punch above their weight, that have been very central in the pandemic crisis, and ones where the council as a whole is pretty interested in kind of the expansion of overall service and missions. And so they're all small enough that they don't generally get a budget hearing before us. And so we wanted, given that context of the kind of budgeting last year, and some of the investments in this year's budget, we wanted to have a hearing that sort of focused on them and what they're doing with those funds, because that's obviously part of the council's role as well, is to not just advocate for expanding our important departments, but then find out what they're up to and what else they need. So that is kind of the theory behind today's hearing. And we're joined by personnel from a number of the departments. So we're joined by, and I will be going first, to Selena Barrios Milner, our Chief of Equity and Inclusion, who has several of these departments under her remit. And then we're also joined by Catalina Lopez Ospina, the Director of the Office of Food Access, by Jennifer Vivar Wong, who's the Interim Director of the Language and Communications Access Office, Yusufi Vali, the Director of our Office of Immigrant Advancement, Evandro Carvalho, the Executive Director of the Human Rights Commission, and Emily Shea, our Age Strong Commissioner, along with Francis Thomas, the Deputy Commissioner from her team. So we're grateful for all of them. I have been joined here today by my colleagues, Councillor Ed Flynn from District 2, Councillor Liz Braden from District 9, Councillor Julia Mejia at large, and Councillor Anissa Asabi George at large. So grateful to them too. And as is our want, we will skip opening statements and jump into presentations from the departments. And so we are going to have the departments sort of speak in order, and then we'll do questions for all, just so that we don't extend this. There is another council hearing scheduled today, so we want to be mindful of the time. So I think without further ado, I'll pass it over to you, Chief Barrios Milner, for any opening words you want to say.
Well, I just want to thank you all for having us here today, having the departments of the Equity Cabinet here, and for your continued partnership in supporting all of Boston's residents and ensuring that we not only recover and go back to where we were pre-pandemic, but that we come back better and stronger. And the departments that you see here, from Immigrant Advancement, Language and Communications Access, and the Human Rights Commission, those are from the Equity Cabinet. Although I'm a big fan of all the departments here, and work in close partnership with all of them. But these departments are crucial to making sure that Boston residents have access to information and resources and prosperity as we move forward. So just thank you for having us here today and for your continued partnership.
Great. Sorry, I didn't realize I was muted. No, thanks. I will go in the order I have them on my sheet. But if anybody has a strong order preference, let me know. Otherwise, I'll go first to Catalina Lopez Espina, our Director of the Office of Food Access.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you to Councilor Buck for having me here and all the City Council. My name is Catalina Lopez Espina. I'm the Director of the Mayor Office of Food Access. The mission of the Mayor Office of Food Access is to improve equitable access, nutritional food with respect to affordability, physical accessibility, and cultural relevance. For the past 13 months, we have done everything in our power to fulfill this mission. In the first 24 hours, the BPS closed, we coordinated an opening 72 meal sites and developed a system of volunteers who deliver meals to housebound households with children. In the first week of the closing, we received around 1,500 calls a week, and we provide food to all of those who call us. Additional, we serve all the referrals that came through our office to the other departments, city councilors, partners, 311 line. By the end of April, we have a citywide food distribution system in place, so that if everyone called to our office, 311 Edgestone, we will provide food to them in 48 hours or sooner if they need it. We set up a text message system where people could let us know if they need additional food, and we deliver to them. In April, we activate the adult meal site, door-to-door delivery for all the adult population, people with chronic disease, and those infected with COVID-19. We also coordinate the distribution of the food provided by the state and the federal government. By the early summer, we provide technical assistance and funding to farmers market organizations so they could safely operate the farmers market. In addition, we coordinate pop-up food distribution network with organizations that direct serve the immigrant community across the city. We provide enough food to serve approximately 9,000 households each week. We are currently serving approximately 3,000 seniors with food distribution on door-to-door. In addition, we provide food deliveries to all COVID-19 individuals to come to our office through hospitals, health centers, social workers, school principals, or their call to the city. We are working with 14 nonprofit organizations that mainly serve the immigrant population, providing fresh, healthy, and culturally relevant food that is obtained through 14 minority-owned businesses in the city of Boston. We are coordinating the federal food boxes in the Boston that we currently are getting around 15,000 boxes a week. In addition, we are investing $500,000 in farmers market coupons. With this initiative, we allow all Boston residents to participate in the farmers market, buy fruit and vegetables, eggs, dairy, baked goods, things that are not covered through the HIP program or SNAP. But this program or this coupon initiative is not tied to SNAP. So everyone is eligible to use the coupons. Our goal is to serve around 5,000 households a month from July to October. Our response to this emergency has evolved as the need has changed. At the beginning of the public health crisis, our priority was provide food to make sure that no one went to bed hungry. We support the food pantries in the city by making sure they have the food and the ability to keep their doors open for the people that needed these services even more than before. As we responded to the emergency, we also working to rebuild the system to provide people with options to choose the most suitable food for them and for their needs. We work on connecting residents with programs that gave them the power to choose the food. We expanded the OLA program from 3 stores to 14. We help open farmers market, mobile markets, corner stores, and soup kitchens. And what I just mentioned might not have been possible for a small team of 3 of us that we were when the pandemic hit us. We were able to do all this thanks to the HHS leadership, my colleagues in the Health and Human Services Cabinet, Strong, Disabilities Commission, BCYF, Boston Public Health Commission, and other departments at the Office of Immigrant Advancement, BPDA, BPD, BPS, ISD, OBM, Mono, BHF, BRF team, and small businesses, and over 500 employees of the City of Boston who help us to answer the phones, the delivery of food, and make referrals. I will need more time than I have now to thank each of the departments, each person that helped us through this time and offer the help always. I'm also grateful to have the network of external partners working with us every day, troubleshooting, brainstorming, and acting. Just to name a few of them, we are thankful to be good partners of the Greater Boston Food Bank, who always respond to the increase of food need at the time when the resource was very scarce. To the YMCA that never say no to an idea to address a problem. To Project Bread, who was always thinking ahead to recovery and sustainability. To the MBTA for putting their staff and their cars to our disposal so we can bring food to homes. To more than 200 organizations that since the day one has been connected with us and working with the city to fill the gaps that we have in our response system. I am very proud of the city works for this to respond to this crisis. And I'm even more proud of my team, their dedication, compassion, love, resilience, endurance that they showing and they keep showing every day at work. Now that we are looking to recover, to an equity recovery, we want to continue removing barriers for people to access the food they need, they want, and they satisfy their cultural preference. We want to strengthen that food access point that offer culturally appropriate, fresh, healthy, and affordable food. We want to connect people with sustainable resources that, in addition to food, provide relief and tranquility during these difficult times. We want to empower and support communities that know better than us what are the solutions for these challenges that are facing. The fiscal year 2022 budget will allow us to build a better system to empower and give choices to support businesses that are access point of food for people that they need and want. This new budget includes funding for Boston OLA program that we currently have 14 stores in Mattapan, Jamaica Plain, Roseberry, Dorchester, and East Boston. We also work to destigmatize safety net programs and food and emergency programs. We want to provide accurate information, change the way that we all speak and perceive these programs, so everyone who needs them feel empowered to use them without any shame. And finally, we will launch a community food equity grant to support new and existing initiatives that fill gaps at the neighborhood level that they want and they propose as their solutions. We know that we will feel the ripple effect of COVID-19 and the food system and many Boston's residents for a long time. We have a lot of work to do, but these new investments are paving the way for an equitable recovery. So thank you for listening to me, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you have.
Great, thank you so much, Catalina. Like I said, I think we'll run to each of these and then do questions, just because I think otherwise we'll run long. And also I know that counselors have interrelated questions. As you mentioned, Catalina, there was a lot of collaboration, for instance, between Strong and food and such. So, so in my order, I'll go next. I think it's, sorry, just pulling this up. Yeah, to language access, Jennifer, if you're ready.
Thank you, Councilor Block. Good morning, everyone. For those who don't know me, I am the Interim Director for the Mayor's Office of Language and Communications Access, also known as LCA. Our mission is to ensure that all of the City of Boston programs, services, and activities are meaningfully accessible to all Bostonians. And in our office, we prioritize two main groups: persons who speak a language other than English and persons with a disability. We work closely with city departments and their LCA liaison to ensure services and information is accessible. We also create and host trainings and provide city departments with resources, including funding to provide LCA accommodations. And we engage with community-based organizations to inform them of the LCA services available to them and their members, and hear their concerns and feedback around language and communications access within the city. In fiscal year 21, the COVID-19 pandemic highlighted the importance of language and disability access, and the city acted quickly to ensure resources and information and services were available and accessible to all. During this time, our office focused on three main areas: COVID-19 response, engagement and outreach, and our internal facing work. Under COVID-19 response, we were able to work together with the Mayor's Press Office, DoIT, and other departments to create a rapid response team, which is a group of community-based translators and multilingual staff within the city who provided rapid translation of critical COVID-19 information into the top 10 languages in less than 24 hours, which was disseminated via a text messaging system to all Bostonians who subscribed, as well as this was posted on multilingual Boston.gov pages, our LCA Twitter, and shared internally with departments and CBOs within the city. As a result of this as well, we were able to create multilingual COVID-19 web pages, again in partnership with DoIT and the city's press team. And these multilingual COVID-19 pages, for example, such as boston.gov/COVID-19/ES for Espanol, which are updated on a regular basis with any new information within the city. In partnership with H Strong, DoIT, and Press, and many other departments, we were also able to provide funding and support the coordination of robocalls with important COVID-19 information in the top 10 languages with the use of 3 community-based vendors and multilingual staff. These were sent to older adults across the city via telephone and are also available online. In partnership with Moya and Disability Commission, as well as H Strong, we were able to create a virtual meetings protocol and resources that would guide departments integrating LCA into this new virtual meeting space, taking into account not only persons who identify as LOTE or with a disability, but also those with limited internet access. In addition to that, we also worked, we supported Health and Human Services Cabinet in translating COVID-19 outreach flyers for testing centers, as well as providing access to the city's language line for over-the-phone interpretation and our VRI service for the centers for virtual ASL interpretation. Under engagement and outreach, our office really wanted to begin building intentional relationships with community-based organizations. And we were able to host one-on-one meetings, which are ongoing, with our goal of not only creating relationships and trust between our office and their organizations, but ultimately their members as well. And we were able to provide them with information about our office, LCA resources. We also heard feedback and concerns while connecting around language access within the city or disability access, and we're able to connect them to existing resources in the city. In addition, we were able to hear about the important work that these community-based organizations were doing within our communities of Boston. During our internal facing work, we were able to create a partnership with the University of Massachusetts, Boston, which our office was then joined by 4 new interns who are actively supporting our office's work around engagement, community outreach, as well as helping our internal work with trainings, finance, and data collection. In trainings, we were able to transform 2 of our trainings into online virtual trainings that can be completed at any time by staff. We also created a series of virtual how-to trainings, which focus on simple steps to acquire LCA accommodations, such as interpretation, translation, ASL interpretation, CART services, and much more. And we additionally created resources to help departments and support the city's efforts of making programs, services, and information accessible. Lastly, we engage proactively with LCA liaisons, hosting monthly meetings as well as one-on-one meetings as needed to share not only new resources and information with departments, but also to provide support as needed to any existing projects within a department. In the upcoming years, LCA will continue working with city departments such as MOYA and the Disability Commission to create additional trainings and resources for the city employees and continue working alongside departments and their LCA liaisons to ensure that we are creating an accessible city for all Bostonians. Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to speak, and I will hand it back to you, Councillor Bach.
Great, thank you, Jennifer. Next up, going to Yusufi from the Office of Immigrant Advancement.
Great. Thank you so much, Councilor Bach, and for all the councilors for being on here today. So just want to introduce myself first, actually. So my name is Yusufi Bali, Director of the Mayor's Office for Immigrant Advancement. I just want to really echo the gratitude that really all of my colleagues have for our many city departments, and including the City Council, which has been a real partner through this crisis. The last year has been very hard for a number of our immigrant communities, particularly our working class immigrant residents. And as hard as that has been, I've been so proud of so many of our partners on this call, as well as our team in getting us through this crisis. And we have certainly a lot more work to continue doing. Just as the crisis unfolded, my office, my team worked to help establish the Massachusetts Immigrant Collaborative. Working with Casey Brock Wilson of the Boston Resiliency Fund, we were able to put in money in this collaborative and then help them raise over $4 million that went directly into the hands for basic needs assistance of our most vulnerable immigrant residents. We then worked to organize a number of biweekly webinars to connect our CBOs who are connected to our immigrant residents to a number of different resources. At these webinars, we have folks from these departments, but also state government and federal government come to present any resources that our immigrant residents can make use of. We've advised on the rental relief fund and ensuring that piece is accessible to our immigrant residents. We worked with our amazing OFA director, Catalina, on the immigrant serving food work. And more recently, we've been working on vaccination webinars in multiple languages, as well as working with HHS to establish pop-up sites. We've done that work of responding to the crisis and at the same time holding to our strategic plan. So in the midst of this crisis, we were able to launch Immigrants Lead Boston, which was our civic integration program where we are now really touching communities and residents from communities that did not have much access into city government. We put 18 folks through this program on how the city works, how the budget works, and are delighted that there's going to be additional investment in this program in this upcoming fiscal year. We've grown our constituent services work by hiring a constituent services coordinator so that our residents are able to more quickly get the help that they need. And I do want to say to the council, if you have folks that particularly are in need of legal services, our immigration clinic has functioned throughout this this crisis, and will continue to only grow with our constituent services coordinator now on. And so if you have anyone with those needs, please do connect them to our department. So we have continued working on our strategic plan. And now as we head into the future, while we're continuing to focus on our short-term needs, the department and my team is really looking at the long-term equitable recovery and how do we really help residents, particularly build wealth and a life for them and their families in Boston. There's two kind of big newer focus areas while we continue our work in the past. One is around economic integration. We're just hired an economic integration specialist that's going to look at how do we build wealth and wages for our immigrant residents. And particularly in this upcoming budget, you'll see that we're making investments around worker-owned co-ops. We're making an investment around foreign trained professionals, particularly targeting our Black immigrant foreign trained professionals and getting them into internships so that they can get into the industries that they're a better fit for, and so that they can grow their wages. We have moved and are moving on the Dreamers Fellowship, a really incredible program for our immigrant youth, regardless of status. We're going to put 200 people through that program. So very excited and excited to partner with YAE on that piece. So we will continue looking at, again, the long term and how can we continue building wealth and wages for our immigrant residents as we come out of hopefully this crisis. The other piece I do want to mention is that legal services is going to be another big focus area for us. While because of the change in the presidential administration, many immigrants in Boston are hopeful instead of fearful. And we've certainly seen an increase in calls for our legal services, and really excited that not only do we have this constituent services coordinator on board to help on this piece and beef up our immigration clinics, but also we're putting 100K into the Greater Boston Immigrant Defense Fund. Let me just end by saying that Moya has grown from 5 to 11 staff in the last year and a half. We had a very supportive mayor and our previous mayor, and we have a really supportive mayor on immigration with Mayor Janey. So we're really excited about the future. There's a lot of work to be done. Our immigrant residents are still in very difficult positions. So we're excited that Mayor Janey is going to continue supporting this work and grow this work. And I know each one of you are very passionate about this work as well. With that, I'll hand it back over to you, Councilor Bach.
Great. Thank you so much, Yusufi. And next up to Evandro Carvalho, the Executive Director of the Human Rights Commission.
Good morning, and thank you, Councilor Bach. Thank you to all the councilors that are present. Certainly want to echo the sentiments, and thank you to all of the departments from City Hall that are here that have been doing amazing work over the past year, and particularly in COVID-19 space, to help our residents in the city of Boston. As you indicated, Councilor, my name is Evandro Carvalho. I am the Executive Director of the Boston Human Rights Commission. Unlike most of these other departments, the Human Rights Commission is sort of been born out of this COVID-19 space. And in fact, the Mayor Washington in 2019, late 2019, August of 2019, reinstated the commission and appointed me as the director of the commission. In January 2020, right before COVID-19 hit, the mayor appointed 7 commissioners who are all appointed by the mayor and are volunteers, individuals from the city of Boston. I'll name them in case you do not know them. Chairwoman Margaret McKenna, Leonard Lee, Leslie Harris, who's a former judge in Boston, Robert McCracken, Reyes Calateche, Ann Russo, and Ben Goldberger. These individuals across the city of Boston, a diverse team of folks that came in again in light of COVID to try to get this department up and running. And in fact, our first meeting, unfortunately, because of COVID particularly, didn't happen until June 30th of 2020. And the meetings all have been on Zoom, like these meetings. But in that time space up until now, we've had 8 public meetings on a monthly basis, if you will, as well as 1 public hearing, which happened last month. In fact, 2 days from today, on the 19th, we'll have a second public hearing. Up until now, the mission of the commission has been to work to include, that includes public, community, and private partners. We provide outreach and information, education, and technical help. We refer discrimination complaints to the right entities for resolution. We seek to find and understand patterns and practices of systematic discrimination, And our goal is to design, propose, and in some cases lead effective interventions. And I'll pause here really to kind of sort of highlight the fact that the commission is not focused, has not been focused, and this is by the decision primarily of the commissioners, on individual complaints of cases, right, of discrimination, which, you know, I know some of you noticed the ordinance for the commission was created in 1984, and it was designed sort of in a space of handling individual complaints, okay? So, but then in this new era, if you will, the commissioners have decided that we're going to focus more on systematic issues and pass on the cases of individual complaints to the appropriate authorities, including MCAD, AG's office, and certainly within the City Hall space with the Fair Housing Commission as well, okay? So I'll, at this point, I'll take a few minutes to kind of go into some of the issues that we identified that we want to work on. These are, again, systematic issues, which include one, digital divide, which the hearing on Wednesday will be focused on this. We're also focusing on the marginalization of Black men in America. One of the other things is the oversight of the recommendations made by the Boston Police Task Force of Reform, the oversight of the recommendations by the Health Inequities Task Force, protection of immigrant rights, which we work tons with Yusufi's Valley and his team, the protection and adequate support of the LGBTQ and the transgender communities in the city of Boston, and finally combating housing discrimination. And I'll spend, again, 2 minutes perhaps on each section to sort of kind of go through some of the things that we've done in each space. I will say we'll start with digital divide, which we've had several meetings in this space, public meetings that is, and listen from nonprofit organizations, city-owned departments, including some of those that are here, including Yusufi came and talked to us, Emily came and talked to us about, you know how elder populations are isolated during this COVID-19 space, and last month, as I indicated, we had a hearing in which we had a public hearing and had several people testify, folks from the immigrant community, folks from H-Strong space, folks from the disability community, and so on. So this was a very, in fact, it was a well-attended event, at least, I believe, 30 people that came and testified on this issue. And certainly we had plenty of written testimony, including video actually testimony on this space. In terms of the marginalization of Black males in the city of Boston and in America, we had an event on January 14th of 2021, which would be a few months from now. And this was a panel event in which focused on the marginalization, trauma, and healing of Black men. We had a guest speaker who's, Brandon Jones from Minnesota, who gave a thorough discussion and research on the space. We had some local people, including Robert Lewis Jr. from the base, Robert Lewis Jr., who also works in the city of Boston, Haywood Fennell, another Black man, to kind of share the experiences in the city of Boston. And we'll continue to work on this space to build partnerships, including MBK Boston, which is another city hall department that we're trying to figure out how to support Black men, and particularly in the healing space going forward in the city of Boston. In terms of the police reform task force, we have obviously followed through, the work of the task force. I'm sure you all are familiar with task force's work, and once they put forth the 15-page recommendations, we review them, we dissected them, if you will. We also had conversations with the commission, with the appointed task force members, including Chair of the Commissioner, Mr. Wayne Budd, and to follow up early January of this year, Tuesday, that is January 19th, we sent then Boston Police Commissioner William Gross a request for status of the implementation of the recommendations of the task force. And at that point, actually, we CC'd his chief of staff, Dennis White. So obviously, we're waiting to see, in terms of what goes on in this police department to figure out how we follow up. But we also do know that, Mayor Kim Janey appointed Attorney Stephanie Everett to oversee the work. So we're going to be reaching out to her to continue the work in that space. In the space of securing immigrant rights, as I mentioned, we worked with Yusuf Valley in a number of issues, both informally and formally. We participated in some of the webinars, and we continue to participate in webinars that they're doing in terms of getting folks out to vaccinate. But more importantly, one of the things that the commission has been a leader on is in the space of combating issues of hate against our AAPI community in the city of Boston. In that space, again, we've worked, we Yusuf, I'll keep saying your name. We worked, LCA, Jennifer has been in that space with us as well. And a number of other city departments, including the Office of Neighborhood Services and so on. We've assembled a team, as I said, of essentially a city hall coalition, along with many leaders from the AAPI community, both in Chinatown, others in Fields Corner, and other parts of Boston, to really determine how we can better support the AAPI community. And in that space, I'll mention a couple of things that we are working on, which include finding out and figuring out how to help that community report incidents of hate in the city of Boston. And we know, unfortunately, that, you know, particularly with immigrant population, they are reluctant to go to the police. And often, unfortunately, when they go to the police, they don't feel that they get the adequate services. So we are working with the BPD to hopefully simplify the way that that folks can report incidents to them, but also position the commission as potentially to be a place, a neutral place, where people can come and report incidents of hate. And in that space, we are finalizing a anonymous, what we call an anonymous incident report form, which we're going to upload on our website and again share with the partners both internally and externally to get the community to know that they can come to us to report incidents of hate. And again, kudos to all of the folks in this space, particularly the City Hall departments that have been very involved in this space. Finally, in that space, and I'll stay again in this Asian American hate incident, another thing that we're hoping to accomplish is to hopefully have a conversation, internal conversation within City Hall to support our AAPI residents, not residents, but employees. We are planning a webinar in this space like this, and to kind of have them sort of express how they feel and see how can the City Hall and all of us can support them, and hopefully have that conversation even much wider space in the city of Boston. There's a few other things in that space, but I'll move on into the work of the commission wants to do in oversight of the Health and Equities Task Force. This task force, I've been participating in this task force from the beginning. They've had at least 2 meetings a week since the beginning of the pandemic. And unfortunately, it's not unfortunate, but they keep working on this space, and a report has been made. But I'm participating actively and looking to see what comes out of there and what the Human Rights Commission can do to support them. I won't keep going through all of them because I realize that it is going to take me all day to go through all the different issues. But I will mention one important one, which is right now we're in the middle of it, which is the protection of LGBTQ residents. Unfortunately, we know that there was a double homicide not too far from here in Dorchester, in which a known prominent member of the LGBTQ community, transgender right activist Johara, was killed by stabbing, unfortunately, down the street. And so in that space, you know, we're right now assembling, and I've had a couple meetings in this space with City Hall, internal City Hall departments, including BPD. They have a liaison for the LGBTQ community, Women's Advancement, and certainly Chief Barrows has been in that space with us as well, and many other departments to figure out how we can help them. We know that next month is LGBTQ Pride Month. There's several events that they're doing that we're going to support, and we're also trying to do a listening session, obviously through a webinar like this, to support that community. That's it in terms of some of the major things that we're working on right now. But I will end by saying that obviously you know that the department is a two team member department at this point. But we have uploaded or put online the position of, I'm drawing a blank now. I'm looking for my notes. Thank you. Here I see manager of education and outreach, okay, which is critical to make sure that the commission gets out there, whether it's through webinars or certainly in person as we open up, to make sure that folks know what we're doing and we're listening to what people need in the city of Boston. So that's the key position. In fact, we have about 60 people that already applied. We're going to proceed with the process of hiring an individual in that space. We're also uploading today the investigatory or investigation or investigator, if you will, position today, to hire an investigator to help us with complaints and inquiries as they come, and hopefully either investigate them when necessary, but more importantly, pass it on to the appropriate state and city and even federal agencies. And we're also going to be hiring a director of research and analysis, and finally a program manager. These are all been approved. We just sort of pacing ourselves to make sure that we do adequate job getting the appropriate people to help us out. But this is what three more positions that should be coming on live, hopefully for the next few months. Our website is up. And has an intake form on there. It's much more sort of alive and updated than it was before. And finally, I know there were some questions about, me, right, and as the director and what I intend to do. And I'm sure it's public now that I am running for to be the next District 4 City Council. I will be on the ballot for that post. Obviously, the election is in September. I have in September, and hopefully for me in November as well. I have no intentions though on quitting this post. I love the work that we're doing. We're in the thick, if you will, knee deep and neck deep in a lot of good work in the city. And as I just said, it's a two people sort of shop right now, including Susan, who does an amazing job. She's the EA and executive assistant. But I'm looking forward to continuing to do the work that this department is doing and grow it. And hopefully, obviously, if I get elected, which I hope to do, when the transition happens, I want to make sure that the next person comes in and has an office that they continue to uplift and continue to serve the people of the city of Boston. So, happy to answer any questions. Hopefully, I answered some of them. I know there were a ton of questions from various counselors, but happy to engage as well further. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Evandro. And before we go to questions, we're going to the fifth, last but certainly not least, our Age Strong Commission with our Commissioner, Emily Shea.
Great, thank you. Thank you so much, Chairperson Bach and members of the council. So I'm really glad to be here today with our Deputy Commissioner of Finance, Francis Thomas, who's here with me, the money man, to talk about the Age Strong Commission, our work, and the proposed budget investment that we have in this upcoming budget. And I'd also like to say Happy Older Americans Month to everybody. The theme for Older Americans Month this year is Communities of Strength, particularly appropriate, I think, after the past year. I want to take a minute before we start to thank my entire team. Their strength and commitment over this past year has been nothing short of amazing. And I'd like to acknowledge the older adults we work with. It was a hard year for everyone, but particularly for them. And I heard countless stories of our older residents checking in on each other, making masks, helping others in the community, communities of strength for sure. And I want to thank all of you for your support for our older residents over this past year too, both the Boston City Council members and my fellow departments who are in this hearing as well. And as isolated as we all needed to be over this past year, it's also a year that we really needed each other. And so thanks for all that you've done. Throughout the pandemic, we fielded over 25,000 calls in our office, and with the help of volunteers, proactively called over 55,000 older adults across the city. We helped over 5,000 older adults get connected to food resources, in partnership with Catalina's office, managed the COVID-19 emergency feeding program, delivering weekly groceries to 3,000 older residents. And my team did over 3,400 emergency day of food deliveries. We kept our shuttle running throughout the pandemic and did over 10,000 medical rides and hundreds of trips to the grocery store. We hosted fun virtual events, moved our arts programming online, and provided support to a network of senior centers across the city as they supported our older residents. We created and engaged our volunteers in remote volunteer opportunities, handing out tablets, and taught people how to use Zoom after, of course, teaching ourselves. And then we spent hours on the phone connecting with the people we serve, comforting each other through all the losses that people suffered this year. We connected hundreds of our older residents to ongoing weekly support phone calls. We received extra Older Americans Act funds through the FFCRA and CARES Act to help to support our office and the 24 agencies that we partner with to meet the needs of our older residents during the pandemic. The majority of the funding that we received was for the Elder Nutrition Program with grab-and-go meals and Meals on Wheels, and also for Caregiver Services and Supports, two critical areas of need over the past year. We also were able to make further investment in housing search, support our senior centers in their transformation to remote programs, and make further investments in partner organizations focused on reducing social isolation. And since January, we've helped over 3,000 older residents get connected to vaccines, including making appointments and coordinating the transportation and assistance necessary to make it a successful appointment. And now we look forward to a new year. We have a proposed $5,205,277 operating budget, a 17.1% increase from the previous years. And we have a total budget of $15.7 million. 53% of these funds are passed through for us. So as Boston's Area Agency on Aging, we receive Boston's Older Americans Act funds and work with a network of 24 community-based organizations to serve Boston's diverse older residents. These funds support some critical services, including a portion of the city's elder nutrition program, so better known as Meals on Wheels, caregiver services, elder legal services, senior programming, housing supports, and more. We retain 43% of our total budget in-house to support our operations. These include direct services such as transportation through our Age Strong shuttle, connection to aging and city resources and information, assistance with Medicare, help accessing benefits programs like SNAP, fuel assistance, and utility discounts, and help with housing. We provide opportunities to connect for others and to connect with others and to stay active and engaged in the community through the coordination of large events and smaller programs, and support over 350 age 55 plus volunteers who give of their time and expertise to make Boston a better place for all. I wanted to highlight a couple of things that we do hope to do this year with our operating dollars. So first of all, we will be getting the taxi coupon program back up and running with a goal of June 1st. I know that there are a lot of people, including us, that want that out there in the community. This will be a partnership model with COVID safety restrictions and limited sites at first, and we will continue to add sites as public health guidance allows. In addition, we are entering our next phase of our age-friendly work, and we will be digging deep into 3 important areas: elder economic security, dementia, and social isolation, with an emphasis on equity and expanding access to programs.
Commissioner, we just started getting kind of a sound interference from your side. Sorry.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, that's better.
Okay. I don't know what that was.
Neither.
But I'll continue. And if it comes up again, let me know, please. So placing an emphasis on equity and expanding access. We will be continuing our expanded work around benefits access, recently becoming a SNAP outreach partner, which will allow us to better target older adults who could benefit from the program. And finally, we are excited about the opening of the new East Boston Senior Center, expected to open this fall, and to making that a special and welcoming place for all of the full East Boston community. The last thing I'd like to mention are the budget investments proposed for our department. This budget places a special emphasis on reducing social isolation, a critical need after the past year, with a $250,000 investment in events and programming. It provides $220,000 in funding for the city's first comprehensive hoarding program, a collaborative initiative between 6 city departments, which will help people remain safely housed. And there is a $100,000 investment made in the city's taxi coupon program, the first step in a modernization initiative that will improve program management, expand access, and enhance the experience of both users and drivers. So more details on each of these investments can be found in the answers we submitted to your questions prior to this hearing. So many exciting things to come. Thank you all for your support of our office. And we look forward to continuing our work in partnership with all of you and with Boston's older residents. Happy to take any questions that folks have.
Great. Thank you so much, Commissioner Shea. And thank you to everyone for your presentations and for the answers that we got back over. Hopefully counselors have those and can use them to inform their questions as well. We were joined during the presentations earlier by Councillor Andrea Campbell from District 4 and Councillor Lydia Edwards from District 1. So I just wanted to note them as well. And now we will jump into questions. So the order for councillors is Flynn, Braden, Mejia, Asabi, George, Campbell, Edwards, and then I'll reserve mine for last. We will do sort of popcorn questions for any and all departments. I'll just encourage councilors, if you can't fit in your questions for all the departments in one round, we'll go to a second round. So just, but I will try to move us just so that we can get everybody heard. So Councillor Flynn, you have the floor.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Bach, and thank you to everybody that's on this call for your professionalism and outstanding work that you've done, especially during this difficult period during this pandemic. And what I liked about all of these departments, as Councillor Bach mentioned, you're punching above your weight class, and that's what I like. You guys do a lot of tremendous outreach with often limited supplies or funding, and you go the extra mile. So I want to say thank you to that. One thing I wanted to make sure of is that these departments, and I think they're the most important departments, agencies in the city, that they have the right resources. So I think it's important that every department is increased here and the services are increased as well. Food access, you guys played a tremendous role during this pandemic. Language access. On language access, Jennifer, how many people personnel are working in the office?
There's currently 2 full-time staff. So it's myself and Guyana, who is our community outreach coordinator. And then we have 4 interns from our partnership with UMass Boston.
Okay, one thing I wanted to do going forward is, instead of relying on a translation service, I wanted to get more city employees that speak various languages into these jobs, not outsourcing or having contractors do it. Is this something that you also support, Jennifer?
We're happy to increase the amount of full-time employees and recruit folks who have multilingual skills. The folks who are contracted out, we also work with community-based organizations. So there are some community-based organizations who serve as vendors as well for the city, who provide interpretation and translation services. And we also work closely with those organizations to pinpoint and also recommend to us interpreters and translators who they trust for the city to also be able to leverage as well.
Do you have a Cantonese speaking person on your staff?
On our staff right now, no, right now, so we have Spanish and Haitian Creole. I myself speak Spanish and Guyana speaks Haitian Creole.
I think it's important that we do have a Cantonese speaking person on the team. Thank you, Jennifer. And I say that because I represent a large Cantonese speaking community, and I want to make sure their voice is heard in city government. So I would like to work with you to see if we can get someone on the team that speaks Cantonese. Human Rights Commission, Evandro, thank you for the work that you're doing. This is also another important agency department. It was established by Mayor Flynn, as you mentioned, in '84. I know you're increasing the number of personnel there. I'm also troubled, like you are, about the rise in violence against immigrants and in particular the Asian community as well. What type of outreach, public awareness outreach are we doing to residents about violence against the immigrant community, communities of color, the Asian community? But do we have an aggressive marketing or outreach campaign about what hate crimes are all about, or violence or intimidation are all about?
Counselor, I'll say this, as I mentioned in my remarks, we are engaged with the leaders of the community right now, particularly the AAPI community, and come up with several things or buckets of work that we want to accomplish. That includes outreach to the AAPI community. And I will say, though, that you're familiar with this. The commission received an additional $100,000 for this next fiscal year, and that we're hoping to sort of go into that space that you talked about, perhaps of doing a campaign. We've discussed even a video campaign, right? That will hopefully accomplish some of the things that you're talking about. More importantly, the key position that hopefully we're going to hire within the next few months is the position of education and outreach manager, who's sort of going to lead this effort. But we are well on our way to accomplishing exactly the goals that you outlined, Council.
Thank you, Evandro. And I had the opportunity the last several years to work closely with Yusuf and respect and admire his work in the Office of Immigrant Advancement. We work together on a lot of issues. Yusuf, what are we seeing? Whether maybe it's not necessarily in Boston, but what are we seeing in Greater Boston or Massachusetts on intimidation or bullying against the immigrant community, using them as a scapegoat maybe during this pandemic? And what type of outreach is your team doing to make the city more welcoming to immigrants?
Thanks, Counselor, and I really always appreciate you bringing up this issue and your focus on our immigrant communities. The reality is that I am concerned about anti-Asian attacks, really across the region. We thankfully haven't seen, any significant incidents here in Boston, but we know that there's underreporting. That's why I'm really excited for what my colleague Evandro Carvalho at the HR Commission is doing, which is creating that hate kind of incident report that can go to the Human Rights Commission. As he mentioned, we've been in conversation with our Asian community leaders, really excited to share that, and this is really for Commissioner Shea to share, but a couple of our Asian partners asked for a self-defense class for our seniors, and the H Strong Commission is working to fund that piece. So we are in conversation continually. We're taking this very seriously, Counselor, and I will say, as far as the broader immigrant community, right? I think that we have to continue to tell the right story about our immigrants, the honest story that they are critical to Boston. They're critical to our economy. They make Boston, their contributions, cultural, civic contributions, make Boston the great place that it is. And I think the challenge is, how do we tell that story to not people that are already listening, but to the audiences that maybe aren't listening, right? And that's something that we're exploring in the future. We did suitcase stories this year. We're 800 people. But the reason we decided to pivot away from this program actually is because we didn't feel it's actually getting to that audience that is really the one that we need to target to bring on board to understand the importance of our immigrants. So I'll leave it at that, Councilor. Thank you.
Thank you, Yusuf. Thank you to the food access program, especially during this year, providing so much food to families in need. Thank you to the Eat Strong Commission. Thank you, Commissioner Shea. I've seen you at so many events. Your team was also working with veterans as well, working with Rob Santiago's team. So I just want to say thank you to everybody here that's doing incredible work. I just wanted to follow up once on Yusuf's comments is, and Jennifer, on the anti-Asian bullying and intimidation, but talking about the positive stories that the Asian community has made, contributions, sacrifices. The Chinese built, along with the Irish, but the Chinese built the transcontinental railroad connecting the East and the West. And what did the US government do after the railroad was finished? We enacted the Chinese Exclusion Act, basically not welcoming the Chinese into the United States, even though they just built a railroad. So there's been a long history of anti-Asian racism in this country. And I'll just say one final thing. I had the opportunity to serve over 20 years in the military in very difficult, hazardous environments, serve with immigrants and with a lot of Asian members as well. But they're willing to die for our country in harm's way. But then when they come back to big cities in the United States, they're not treated with respect or dignity, or their families aren't either. So we have a lot of work to do in our country on racism against immigrants and against communities of color. But I just want to say thank you to everybody here that's doing exceptional work on these issues. Thank you, Councilor Block.
Thank you, Councilor Flynn. Appreciate those words. Next up is Councilor Braden, and then it'll be Councilor Asabi George. Councilor Braden.
Thank you very much. It's always a delight to hear all the great work that all these that you're all doing. In the midst of COVID, it was great to know that you were working so hard to help support our immigrants and our elders across the city, and making sure families are fed. And I had a few questions. I sent some questions in, but there's a few things just in terms of immigrant advancement. The question I had was, I ask this every year, monies for a basic level English language classes for our new immigrants or even older immigrants who basically do not have very little English, but they're not really at the level where they can benefit from some of the other ASL classes that would be geared more towards employment targets and very goal-oriented employment targets. These folks are just at the very basic level with very little English. I don't know if we have allocated any more money to that, those programs. I'm hearing a few things that have come across my desk recently that are very concerning, and I don't know, this is more of an Age Strong Commission question. And it might be even a human rights question. Scammers. I heard about an elder who got a call the other day from someone who appeared. They had their wits about them, so they didn't give them any information, but they were representing themselves as a representative of Optum Pharmacy, and they were very persistent in asking for the elder's social security number and their Medicare number. and they basically, they hung up on them. But this is probably one of many instances where it might appear that this is a scam, and that elders, we need to do, what are we doing to educate our elders about specific instances like this? It appeared to be very legitimate, like Optum is a pharmacy that delivers medications to people's homes. So, but for somebody to ask for their an unsolicited call to ask for a social security number and a Medicare number is very, very problematic. I had a question about caregiver supports. Many of our elders are actually taking care of other elders or family members, and especially during COVID, that have been increasingly isolated. I don't know if we have any formal programs to support caregivers. And the other question that came up recently as well, is there any education for elders about unsolicited cash offers for homes? They're getting letters and calls from, I would say, speculative investors who want to offer them cash for their home. It's particularly problematic if the elder doesn't speak English is not their first language. So if somebody comes and offers you a huge amount of money for your home, it's really a dicey situation, and they may be entering into a contract that they don't necessarily understand all the implications of. The hoarding question, very complex issue. I was wondering what agencies we're working with to help support folks who have a hoarding problem. It's a complicated mental health issue, and I don't know what other agencies we're working with to support those folks. And I had a question about the culturally appropriate food access. Again, a recent outreach to, what outreach are we doing with SNAP to elders or families with who maybe are in religious minorities, who maybe need halal or kosher foods. And then we have 140 languages in Boston, and it's great that we have a rapid response team. But I know out here in Austin, Brighton, we have Russian, Portuguese are two of the languages that don't fall in that threshold. So it's particularly important that we have access to those translation services. And I think that's a lot for now. So thank you very much.
Okay, I can take a crack at that, Counselor.
Thank you.
I got all your things. So scams, obviously a hugely important issue, and I think great to use this platform. If there's anyone out there listening, you should never ever give your social security number over the telephone to anybody. Nobody will ask you for that over the phone who's doing legitimate business. We do promote scams both on social media and in our magazine. We also partner with BPD. Their community service officers do some presentations on scams. And this year we are starting a new program as part of our volunteer work. There's a training called Money Smarts for older adults, which is a great training that was done by the FDCC, which teaches older residents about scams and how to protect their finances and what they need to do for the future. And we are currently in the midst of recruiting 55 and older volunteers who will be running that training virtually at first, and then when we can do it in person across the community. So that will be a new thing for this year, but certainly a really important issue that we need to do more work around. For Caregiver Supports, I'm so glad you mentioned this, Counselor, because we should take a minute to talk about the Family Caregiver Program. So this is a program that is funded through the Older Americans Act. We put it out, we do an RFP and the organization that's been running it for the past few years for us is Boston Senior Home Care. They do a great job. The program recently got a lot more money through the CARES Act, and they'll get an additional investment through the American Rescue Plan Act. And so certainly for the program supports people who are providing caregiving for people over the age of 60. There is a sister program that we also support with those funds that is a program for people over the age of 60 who are grandparents or providing kinship care to grandchildren. And so there's programs for both things. They're great programs for people to access. They can help to assess a situation, provide supports, connect you with resources, really fabulous programs out there. One thing that the Family Caregiver Program at Boston Senior is doing with some of their CARES Act dollars is actually we've approved an initiative to promote the program. There's not usually enough funding to do things like that. So you'll see some of their promotions up on billboards and around, and they're actually getting a significant number of new referrals from that, which is great. Really happy to see that. For around unsolicited cash offers for homes, we don't do a lot around that beyond kind of telling people to watch out for scammers. But certainly something we could talk about with our partners at D&D and the Home Center. I think it's a great idea, and we should be talking about that. There's a lot of that, and there has been a lot of that going on throughout any neighborhood that's experiencing a lot of development, which is a lot of our city neighborhoods right now. For hoarding, so this hoarding investment will allow us to put out an RFP for a clinical partner and bring on board a partner to provide the array of clinical services that you need for a comprehensive hoarding program. In the past, we've only had clean out partners, but you know that just cleaning someone's home out doesn't really work. You need to have that clinical piece as well to really address the issues and the reasons that people are hoarding. So looking forward to putting that out. There are a number of organizations out there that do focus on hoarding. And so looking forward to bringing a partner on board through an RFP process. And I will say for now, TPP certainly does good work around hoarding. They're one partner that does some work around hoarding. There's a hoarding program up on the North Shore that does some good work around hoarding. So there are programs out there, and this program is actually modeled on one up in the North Shore that's specifically for older adults. And then for culturally appropriate access to food, certainly for SNAP, we will be targeting outreach to people from all cultural backgrounds. We actually are doing some work over this summer with UMass, which we're really excited about. It's part of our economic security work, and will help to feed into provide some information as we develop a citywide elder financial security plan. But this work is going to be with communities that we think are underserved by our office, and really partnering with community-based organizations to find the appropriate people within that community to do some focus groups to better understand communication channels, needs, and how we can make sure that the services that people need, that we're getting them connected to it. So more to come on that, but certainly SNAP does allow you to purchase, as Catalina likes to say, food that you, what is it that you say, Catalina?
Need and want.
Need and want, shoot. You'd think I would have remembered that after the past year. Food that you need and you want. And then certainly with Meals on Wheels, the bidding process for those meal providers is done through our partner agency, Ethos. We were able to bring on a halal restaurant to that program during the pandemic. That restaurant actually went out of business, so they're no longer a meal provider for that program, but always interested in providing support to new partners for that program. So I think I captured everything that all of your questions, but if I didn't, let me know.
Thank you, and I appreciate all your answers and the detail. And Madam Chair, I see the gavel, and I'm really sorry. I had a lot of the questions came up in the interim since I sent in my questions a few weeks ago.
No worries. It's just that I do need to. I did let that run long because the commissioner was providing so much information, but we do need to go. So it's Councillor Campbell and then Councillor Mejia. Councillor Campbell.
Thank you, Councillor Bach. And of course, thank you to all of the folks on the Zoom for the incredible work you guys do every day. And not only through COVID, George Floyd, of course, rising attacks against immigrants across the country, transition from the last 4 years. There's a lot going on. So just really wanted to express my gratitude to each and every one of you, not just the chiefs and commissioners, but all of your employees who work really hard. I'll jump right in, just being mindful of time. I guess I'll start first with just some questions for the Age Strong Commission and just some of the work there. Thank you, Commissioner Shea and Francis. Thank you both for the work you're doing, your team. A few questions. One is, what neighborhoods, and this could be an information quest that you could send later on, you don't have to sort of answer it right now, but what neighborhoods have the highest percentage of seniors? Just sort of an updated list there. And do we have this data by council district? The second is, has the city ever explored a rebate for senior parking specific to the Longwood medical area, which obviously parking and all that comes up? The third is, how does Age Strong sort of support city departments in reaching and serving the needs of seniors across the city? And have we ever considered a dedicated person in each department focused on working with seniors? And the fourth is, what neighborhoods is the department most successful at reaching? In which neighborhoods or senior populations by race or ethnicity are we struggling to reach? And I had a question around the senior home repair program, but I'm going to save that for D&D. And then two other questions. What are we doing to improve senior access to transportation in general, particularly medical appointments? This comes up quite a bit, but also just for other types of appointments. And then lastly, how does the department partner with the Office of Veteran Services? Sometimes we feel when we're responding to cases there's a disconnect between veterans, seniors, when clearly there are folks who fit both those categories. And I'll stop there and then save questions for the departments for the next round, as I'm sure that will take up all my time. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Counselor. I'm happy to do my best to answer those and also watch for the gavel, which I didn't know was a symbol. So neighborhoods with the highest percentage of seniors, we certainly can get you that information, Counselor. They tend to be in the southwest part of the city. So West Roxbury is traditionally our neighborhood with the highest percentage. And the latest list that I have is from the BPDA 2020 by the numbers, which when I'm not speaking, I'm happy to put in the chat for you, but that has a good list of the 60 plus population divided up by neighborhood. I do not have it based on council district. In terms of a rebate for senior parking for the Longwood medical area, we have never looked into a rebate for senior parking. So that's certainly something we could explore. If you had kind of more thoughts on that, I'm happy to hear them. But parking is not something that I think that we've had kind of an age-based rebate on.
Follow up, thank you. on that one.
That sounds great. In terms of the city departments having dedicated people. So actually, our age-friendly work, this is very much what that work is supposed to be, is really breaking aging kind of out of its silo and out of our department and working cross-departmentally to really bring aging across city departments and across kind of all sectors of city life that we think of in the city. And so I have a team of 3. One position is unfilled right now. So right now I have a team of 2 that work on that work. And it's really exciting work and really necessary work. I love the idea of having a dedicated person in each office. And certainly we spend a lot of our time really making sure that the needs of older adults, that we raise them and have them front and center as departments consider the work that they do. In terms of our most successful partner neighborhoods and most struggling neighborhoods, you know, I like to think that we serve all neighborhoods well, although I don't think that any one department is the be all and end all of anything. And I think we really also rely on our the 24 organizations that we partner with to expand our reach into all of the Boston neighborhoods. We certainly have good relationships in Mattapan, Dorchester, and Roxbury. You know, I think that the target of a lot of our funds are Older Americans Act funds, and the target of those funds are kind of our lower income populations. And so that tends to be, I think, where we build a lot of our bridges. But certainly our work should be touching all of the older residents that need us. In terms of transportation, so the Age Strong shuttle does provide free medical appointments for people over 60. We brought on some new scheduling software that we had about 6 months with prior to the pandemic hitting. Right now on our shuttles, we're still with COVID restrictions. So we're still doing 1 person per van with the driver. I really look forward to kind of post-pandemic times as we're able to put more people onto those vans. I think that this software will really help us with our scheduling and help us be able to increase capacity and do more rides. The ultimate goal is to get to a place where we can do more than just medical and grocery shopping rides, because it's important to, health is about the full person, not just getting to the doctor. And then certainly we have partnerships with the Office of Veteran Services and work collaboratively with them. But if your office is sensing anything like you're not sure where to refer, we can refer. Feel free to put us both on an email, and we'll make sure that we're connecting in with them. There are programs that their office provides and that our office provides that both would be beneficial to an older veteran. So hopefully that answers your questions.
No, that's very helpful. And the question around, and I guess just it demonstrates some areas where we could be a little bit more innovative, frankly, right, to expand services for our seniors. The question around just where we do it well in terms of reaching seniors in certain neighborhoods or by race, ethnicity, and where there are barriers is just that to identify, not to, of course, suggest that we do a bad job, but just to suggest where we need greater resources or where we may need greater partnerships with community-based organizations to reach our seniors in certain parts of the city who feel, for example, disconnected from getting services. So I will save my questions for other departments in the next round. Thank you, Commissioner, and thank you, of course, your team. And I got to give a special shout out to my girl, Cheryl, who is my senior advisor, has been with me since the very beginning, who through COVID and a whole bunch of things continues to show up every day to support our seniors in our district. So always want to lift her up. Thank you. And thank you, Councilor Bach.
Great. Thanks so much, Councilor Campbell. Next up is Councilor Mejia, and then it'll be Councilor Edwards. Councilor Mejia.
Yes, thank you. Thank you all to all your hard work. I have to say these are some of my favorite departments, especially during COVID. You have been on the front lines. So I just have a few questions. I'm going to start with language access. You know, we've been working with you on a new language access ordinance that would likely require changes in funding. Can you speak to how your funding needs would change should the ordinance pass? And how, oh, sorry, you guys already answered that one. Sorry, catching up here. So in our, okay, here we go. Okay, in our meetings and working sessions on our language access ordinance, we identify that the city is currently not equipped to fully implement broad systems change to help people who cannot read or write in any language. Our literacy task force seeks to address that. But in the meantime, how are we using this funding to explore ways to provide services for those folks? I know we talk a lot about language access and communication. I think that, as you know, in a lot of our working sessions, I always kept talking about the fact that folks, not everyone even is able to read and write even in their own native language. So I'm just curious about what that looks like for you all.
Thank you, Councilor Mejia. Yeah, so definitely in our office, we've also explored ways to make things accessible through icons. And I think there's going to be larger conversations on how we can continue making things accessible for specifically the group of folks who cannot read in their native language or read English. And so that is one approach that we're taking within our office, which is looking at ways of thinking beyond accessibility, beyond writing and beyond interpretation, thinking about how to make content accessible, whether that be through videos or icons, or making sure that there's universal icons within the city. But there's definitely more work that LCA will be thinking through in order to figure out how we can best support this group.
Excellent. And then this question is for the Office of Immigrant Advancement. To Councilor Flynn's earlier point, how is Moya working with BPS to ensure that the history of immigrants in Boston is a part of our school's curriculum?
Thanks, Councilor Mejia, and always appreciate you being such a champion for our immigrant residents. It's a great question. I mean, the transparent answer is that we obviously are very well connected to BPS, but it's not a particular issue that we've kind of leaned into. But it's certainly something I'm absolutely willing to, look into. We're definitely very supportive, as you know, of our bilingual schools, the Margarita Muñoz Academy, and also working with Binka and other schools. But that's something that we're definitely happy to explore with them.
Mm-hmm. And what about other more non-traditional schools like Bata?
Yeah, so we certainly work with Bata. Actually, one of my staff members is on their advisory board. So we're very well connected. You organized the meeting for us as well, for us to speak to a number of their students. So, as you know, Counselor, really excited that we're going to have the Dreamers Fellowship program this year. 200 young people who've never had an opportunity, for summer enrichment programs are going to get that. Binka is part of that. And I think, my hope is we'll continue expanding this program. It's going to be a year after year program. So very exciting from an equity perspective.
Excellent. So I'm going to go to the Human Rights Commission folks. Can you just speak a little bit about your efforts around addressing the digital divide beyond the publication of your upcoming study? And what action items do you plan to take to make an impact on municipal broadband in the city?
Councilor, thank you for that question. As you know, we've been working very hard in this space over the past several months. I can tell you, though, that the way that the commission is structured right now, we're not necessarily what I like to call a direct service department. We do intend, as you said, to produce a report And, the report will hopefully be sort of like what we call a live sort of document, right? So we can continue to follow up with the providers, continue to follow up with City Hall, Do It and BPS and BHA and others to figure out how to continue to close that gap. So I guess the short answer is that, we're going to produce the document, the report, and we're going to keep working on the issue.
Okay. And who made the decision to change the function to the Human Rights Commission to move away from individual cases instead of focus on systems? Do the people know about the change that was made? I think a lot of people look at the Human Rights Commission and think that's a place where people can help me.
Yes. I mean, and we will continue to help people, right? The reality is that when the commissioner was created, and particularly when the commissioners, I should say reactivated, not created, right? Reactivated in 2019 and 2020, the decision by and large was made by the commissioners that are on the board now. To say, when obviously we know that there are different departments, not only within City Hall, but other state agencies, including MCAD. There's the HUD, right? There's the EOC, many other agencies that are currently providing direct services and doing complaint sort of driven work. It sort of was in their wisdom to say, okay, let's find the gaps, if you will, right? To work not only in systematic issues, but also I should mention that we're going to do, and we may do direct sort of complaint driven work if the other agencies are not handling, right? As you can imagine, all the commissioners appointed, right? They're volunteer people in busy lives. So I think it was a sort of executive decision to say, let's focus on the gap, and particularly because we started right in the middle of COVID-19, right? All these issues that we just spoke about and continue to speak about, I think it was a good decision to say, let's not sort of focus on individual claims, particularly because the commission does not have the adequate staff at this point. Perhaps we'll have it in the future, but I think because of COVID-19, it made sense to sort of just focus on what we can do now, if you will. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. I just wanted to say I have 13 questions for Age Strong. No, I'm just joking. So I just wanted to say we absolutely have no questions because they did such a great job at answering all of our questions and they were very thorough. So we really do appreciate you all. I was just joking. You get the A+ for, everybody get an A+ for all the hard work that everyone is doing to serve our most vulnerable. So I don't have any further questions. And thank you all again for your hard work and leaning in to these issues. You have my heart. So thank you. Thank you all.
Thanks, Counselor.
Thanks so much, Counselor Mejia. Next up, Counselor Edwards.
Thank you so much. And I echo the compliments of my colleagues for every single one of your departments. You really are have led the way and have done your best, honestly, to make sure that all of our services are as inclusive as possible and are, I think, reflective of the true diversity of Boston. I just want to pick up on some of the questions, starting with the Human Rights Commission. I understand. I was a little. Let me just make sure. I'm happy to see the increase in the budget. I'm happy to see that there is a staff coming up and going. I'm happy to see that there's a lot of, that you have an online presence, right? There's an intake form. How do you, I tried to go through it, but I couldn't figure out. So if you're doing systemic issues or analysis, which is in your, it's in your analysis and your understanding of your office, how is your intake form collecting in systemic complaints? That's one, I guess. I'll start there because I want to kind of just how are you gathering systemic complaints? I would think you're probably getting several pinpoints or questions from several different tiny complaints and then thinking there might be a systemic issue.
You want me to go the address or you want to keep going? You're on mute now, Counselor.
Sorry, haven't been on mute the entire time?
No, just the last 5 seconds.
Like, really? All right. So what I'd like to do is just kind of like pinpoint a couple questions and then turn it over to you, and then pinpoint a couple questions, turn it over to the next department. So again, how are you expect to get systemic complaints? Are you getting several pinpoints from people and then thinking, oh, there might be a systemic problem, we have to respond? There are individual rights that the city of Boston or protections that only the city of Boston has, the state and other agencies don't have. So what do you expect to do for those? Like parental status is a protected status here. It's not at the state level. So it's like union membership. And we have actually, we're more progressive in some places than the state is. So do you expect to do something with those individual cases? And then finally, I was wondering if the HRC would help to lead on those areas of discrimination, for example, the credit checks and credit background checks. I remember the office came out somewhat ambivalent about whether that should be a protected class or not. And that was a little concerning, considering I would think HRC should be leading in the protected category in classes. And statistics are very clear. Credit is oftentimes used as a precursor or as a fake attempt to really discriminate based on race and other categories. So that was for HRC. For Age Strong, thank you for the updates on East Boston. Thank the senior center this fall, I understood, and thank you so much for bringing back the cab vouchers. I know the North End was particularly concerned about having that. That's June 1st. Will you have a list then of your areas first, and then how, and a timeline for each of the parts of the city that are eventually going to get them? I'd like that, so we can make that announcement. We get a lot of requests about that. And then also the Nazaro Center, just confirming that as it's the community center in the North End is going to grow at a different location, that there's always a space for our seniors there at the Nazaro Center. And then for Immigrant Advancement, I want to thank you so much for your incredible work. I want to thank you for your, I think in sometimes it's sad, brave work because of so much anti-immigrant bias in some parts of our city. I did want to ask about I think it's this new fund, or the Dreamers Fellowship Fund, and just get more information on the program and how many youth were employed or plan to be employed. And also, could you coordinate with BPS high schools and guidance counselors to start identifying kids a little earlier? I think this summer is going to be pretty busy, but I'd love to hear a little bit more about that. I know Councilor Mejia talked a lot about the language access ordinance, and we're still in the middle of a good conversation about that. So I'll leave that for our working sessions. So that's it.
I'll start.
Who should start? Thank you, Council.
I'll go first, usually.
Go for it.
Okay. And I'll try to assess each. So the intake form, it's designed twofold, right? One, it'll help us sort of, if anyone comes in there with a complaint that perhaps should go, or incident that should go to the MCAD, we'll find a way to triage it to the MCAD. But over time, hopefully, if we get in cases of particular situations, say for instance, as we talk about immigrants and hate incidents and discrimination against AAPI community, if we continue to see it and see it from a particular industry or see it from a particular business, then it's where the systematic investigation comes in. Okay, so hopefully that answers your question, Counselor, in terms of what the intake form is designed to do. But in terms of systematic complaints, it's not necessarily complaints, it's sort of issues. The things that I outlined earlier, for instance, whether it's digital divide, we certainly know that the reform within Boston Police Department is a systematic issue, right? The health inequities is a systematic issue. The issue of housing discrimination, that's a systematic issue that we'll potentially look at, right? Particularly in light of the Suffolk University study that came out last year, I believe, and I think it was in July of 2020, that indicated that Black people and voucher holders were being systematically, if you will, discriminated against within the city of Boston. Right? So we're going to be working hopefully with the Fair Housing Commission to look at that, right? So, and in terms of the other space that you mentioned, of updating, if you will, the ordinance, right? We all, and I think actually the effort should be, Councilor Edwards, is to sort of look at the work, of the ordinance right now, right? How is it designed, and what is it that the city intends it to do in the future? Certainly, as you mentioned, credit history should be a protected class. And, I've seen in other cities, for instance, where folks that have hair like you and I are protected, right? Because hair becomes an issue, has become issues in other parts of the country, and even actually locally, I don't think in Boston, but across the bridge, if you will, right? So there's different things that we should look at in general, I think, to see how do we update the ordinance. And the commission is certainly willing and able to help drive that conversation and make recommendations to you all in terms of what we should do. And finally, what I'll say is that the spaces in which, as you indicated, Counselor, that the people they're not protected. They are not protected classes, we say, on the state or federal level. Those are the spaces that the commission is looking to do investigations in, right? So if there's not agency, as you said, I think you said parental rights are not protected at the state level. If we get incidents of those will take it sort of from soup to nuts, if you will, right? So those are the 3 points that I hopefully will answer your question, Counselor. Happy to follow up in any further of it if you want. And talk offline, certainly, particularly in terms of the ordinance and what we should do in that space.
Great. I can go next. I would be very speedy. So we are still awaiting the final approval from the city workforce and operations team for the taxi coupons. We believe it will be June 1st. And as soon as we have that final approval, and we will make sure that the list of sites gets shared with Chantel so she can share it with all of you. Because I know that people want to access those. And then for the Nazaro Center, thank you. We actually haven't been involved in those conversations with the community center space, and I certainly will circle with BCYF to see how that's moving along. Thank you.
And I'll go next. Councilor Adverse, first of all, thank you so much for your kind comments. And there's no exaggeration for me to say that part of the reason that we're able to do the work that we have been able to do is because for years, you've been an advocate and really courageous in raising a lot of the issues around particularly our immigrant residents without status. So thank you for getting us to this point. In regards to the Dreamers Fellowship Program, we're putting 200 folks, 200 young people through that this summer. It's a fellowship program, stipended, program, and the application actually due date for the entity that would kind of work on it would be is today. We've had 2 pilots throughout the year with 50 and now 150 folks, where it's basically been one coordinating organization that gets the grant, and they work with anywhere between 5 to 10 immigrant serving nonprofit partners that are really connected to many of our immigrant youth, regardless of status. Totally agree that we need to target our schools. Be delighted to share in our last pilot, we actually had Binka that was a part of it. So I think there's a huge opportunity to grow this piece out. And my hope is that we've got the summer program now year after year because we've got public funding dollars for it, and obviously Moya's putting and it's in our budget for this year. I think we got to figure out how to do it year after year during the school year, and certainly I'm willing to go to private partners to raise as much money as possible, as is other partners in the city. I see the gavel. Sorry, Council Block.
No, it's fine. If you wanted to finish your sentence, if there's anything else.
No, that's it. I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Excellent.
Thank you, guys. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Edwards. All right, we will jump now to my questions, and then I will go, if councilors who are still here have some second round questions, we will go to those. I'm going to just give myself a timer so that I pay some attention to the time. Yeah, so I think I mainly wanted to kind of run through with people like sort of budget increase type stuff. And thank you for all the answers to our questions that we got. As Councilor Mejia said, it definitely makes it more efficient here in the hearing. So Evandro, I wondered if you could speak a little bit to, so HRC right now, you got 2 people. There's this plan in the works to expand to 6. Obviously you don't have all those posts posted yet. What's the kind of trajectory like in the budget? Is the vision that all 6 people are on staff by this time next year, or like what's the hiring trajectory there.
That is correct. In fact, hopefully by the fall.
Okay, so the goal would be that by the fall, that we're up from 2 FTEs to 6 FTEs.
Correct.
Okay. And that would obviously be transformative for the department.
Yes, it would. Yes, a lot
So-
of the outreach work that we're talking about here, will certainly keep going. So
Right.
with two of us primarily right now, and we get support from a lot of the departments here, but having certainly an outreach coordinator, as well as one of the other positions we're going to hire is a director of research and analysis. That would be helpful. We're going to have a program manager, and we're going to have an investigator to start doing investigations, particularly if they're, as it was mentioned, if there's incidents that perhaps happens that it does not go to the MCAD and other agencies. So.
Mhm. And tell me a little bit about the so it feels to me like, in terms of these systemic things that you've discussed, like there's like a few different things going on. There's sort of regular intake that the HRC is going to keep doing, and hopefully, with more staff, be able to be more robust, and specifically in those spaces that there isn't another agency covering. And then there's some of these kind of like convening task force-y type things, like focusing on the anti-Asian hate issue and the LGBTQ violence issue, right? You raised both of those.
Correct.
Then there's stuff like the digital divide, which I know you guys are holding the hearing on Wednesday, and we're excited about that because it sounds like you guys have done some real work with the data, or like supervising the police reform thing, where, I mean, I guess I'm curious because my instinct is that that's something where the HRC, is digging into the digital divide issues, but at some point that turns into recommendations for like do it and others to implement, or like I honestly think with OPAC coming up, I'm not sure exactly what in practice your supervising of the police reform piece is going to need to look like now that we've codified that in an ordinance. So I'm trying to ask you, basically, is my instinct right that some of these things are not necessarily forever? They're sort of like places the HRC's made an intervention and then it will move away.
Exactly. It's, the systematic approach to the issues, they're all sort of like, as we say in law, fact specific, right? What we do in that particular space depends on, by and large, the issue, right? As you mentioned, finally, if you will, we got a full-time staff in OPAC, right? And that's going to hopefully build that office out and make sure that all the recommendations are being implemented, right? In the time that they were said to be implemented. But, initially, obviously, when we started looking at this, this was under Mayor Walsh, right? Things were not moving at least as the commissioners thought as progressively as they needed to be. So we sent a letter out to the commissioner in January and said, tell us what's been done so far, right? But it's all going to be, dependent on the issue. I think the work that we devise will sort of be, specific to the issue, but hopefully over time, there'll be model situations in terms of how we execute things over time. Does that make sense?
Yep. No, that's helpful. And then Jennifer, if I move over to you, so similarly, right now you have, am I right? Like right now you've got 2 staff at Language Access. I know you said that earlier, but you were financially authorized for 3, right? And then now we're adding 2 more. Is that right? So we're going up to 5?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. And can you just say, just because I am mindful, we have a lot of good answers in our written stuff, but there might be people watching at home. So can you just say a little bit about what those 2 are doing?
The current ones or the new ones?
So the new ones, like what's the capacity we're adding with the budget?
Yeah, so there's one position that's currently posted, which is for a learning and development coordinator, which would focus on the internal training of departmental staff within the city and creating more resources. So it'll focus on ensuring that we're increasing the number of staff trained on not only how to provide LCA accommodations, but also the resources that are available to them. And then the other 2 positions, one is a research analyst, which would focus on kind of that community research, seeing what kind of additional information we have around language access or disability access needs within the city, and also focusing on internally, working through all the internal reports from departments, analyzing those reports. And then another staff position is an executive assistant or an administrative assistant position, which would help support, I think, kind of that additional projects support to departments and their liaisons, and not only internally with finances, but also seeing how we can support departments even further. And so those are the three positions altogether that we're trying to get in the office.
Got it. And in terms of, one of the questions I had asked is, so I think it's great that you guys are gonna have a dedicated point person to work with the departments. I have thought for a long time that a limitation of our language access approach is that we ask every department to designate a person, but we don't ask every department to give that person any time in their day to focus on language access. So we sort of say, take somebody with a full-time job and say that they're the language access person. And there's no way that that language access work can then get done unless either they're skimping on their current job or they're working more hours off the clock, right? So, so I guess I'm curious whether in the conversations about bulking up the office itself, and which is completely necessary for the new protocols that have been put out, whether there's also been conversations about kind of increased allocations across all departments to make that kind of an half an FTE or an FTE or whatever possible. I was wondering if you could speak to that.
We're happy to explore those conversations. The LCA liaisons are appointed by the departments themselves. They're designated by the departments themselves.
Right, but you guys don't require the departments currently, right, to say that those people have any devoted time for this purpose. Is that right?
So within appointing a liaison, there is a description of kind of what is expected from a liaison for every department, and the department heads do make that final decision on who gets appointed to be the liaison for the departments.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah. So it's obviously a bigger conversation with me and OBM and all, but I just wanted to highlight that. And I think hopefully it sounds like your research analyst and your person working with him will also help us understand where we need that more capacity at the department level. Can you, and in terms of the large contracted services increase, that 300,000, is that doing more of what we do, or is that doing things differently?
So that is doing more of what we do. So how I know that I saw a question here around kind of how those contracted services are leveraged within the city. So it's additional funding. As you saw, there's changes within the language and communication access policy, and we're also anticipating changes with this new ordinance that's coming, and we're very excited about keeping working together with Councilor Edwards and Councilor Mejia. And so that is going to allow us to expand contracted services and allow us to provide more language and disability access within the city.
Got it. Okay. And those are budgeted centrally. Do departments also keep language access budgets like for the contracted services, or is that 900,000 like kind of all of the language contract service accessing by all the departments?
So it's by all the it's accessible by all the departments.
Right. So okay. So the point is, however many times that ISD contacts like for interpreter services, that's inside that line item, right? It's not sitting over separately on ISD's budget.
So it's, yep, exactly. So it's inside our line item. So we would keep track of that. Yep, exactly what you said. Got it.
Okay. Right. Which makes me think that that's going to need to continue to grow. What's the scale of, I know that we bulked up interpretation during the pandemic. You spoke to it because so much of what we were doing on the city services side sort of felt like vital documents, right? In a way that it hadn't always. It's different when we want everybody in all languages to know if we're having a pizza party, right? But it's a little bit different than telling seniors, like, this is how we're going to get you food because you're homebound now, right? And so And I know we also spent a bunch of federal CARES and FEMA and stuff money on that. So do you have a sense of what the scale of our kind of utilization of interpretive contractual services was last year, if you include external funds and federal fund sources?
I don't have the number in front of me, but that is something we can pass on to Chantel.
Okay, that would be great. That would be wonderful to understand. Okay, I do have questions like this for the other departments, but I'm going to first give my colleagues a chance to get in any second round questions because I used my time. So I'll just go up to the top. Counselor Braden, I think you're one sec. Yeah, I think you're the first top. So do you have any second round questions for the departments? All right. Well, Counselor Braden might be, I'll text her, but in the meantime, I think it would next be Counselor Campbell.
Thank you, Mr. Bach. Many of my questions that I had were asked by other council colleagues, so thank you, particularly around Office of Language Access, and then not just Immigrant Advancement, but the Human Rights Commission. But going back to the Human Rights Commission, and thank you, Evandro, for those updates. Looking forward to your team, frankly, being expanded so that you guys can do the work of this incredible body. And so one question I had was on, so if someone right now were to go online, fill out an intake form, can you just walk me through what the process would be for a constituent? And then the second, like what that would look like? And then the second piece is, are you waiting for this additional human capital to be able to really brand and market yourself out there so folks know the power of this commission and what it does? And is that sort of one of the barriers or some of the barriers to being able to do that? Because I think still a lot of folks don't have a clue that the HRC exists and the power of it to help them in their daily lives with respect to certain issues.
Yes, thank you for that question, Councilor Campbell. I will say that, you know, as I mentioned earlier, the first position now we have out there now, and we have 60 people at least that are interested in working in that space, is the outreach coordinator and the education manager. So yes, that's a hinder by and large, because as the head of the department, I'm sort of having to do both management and be in the weeds and, you know, and work on flyers with Susan, you know, attend every meeting that people need with the department. And so it's hard to do everything at the same time, if you will, right? And then come to hearings like this or you know, and so on. So that's one of the barriers. But in terms of, but we are keeping, you know, we keep going. We're still, obviously the website is up. We've engaged the AAPI community. We continue to do that. We're planning an event, as I said, hopefully within the transgender community space, in, you know, the fact that we have a lot of city departments as partners has been very helpful. But in terms of, to go back to the first question, in terms of the intake was just uploaded a week or two ago. But essentially, you know, it asks people questions to try to figure out what is it that they need help with, right? And, you know, depending on what they say, essentially the next step is for us to get in touch with them, right? And determine actually the first step is to determine where perhaps, you know, the incident happened. Did it happen in the city of Boston? Is this something that could go to MCAD? Is this something that is housing? Is this something that, you know, is EOC? Is this something that we can potentially just send to the AG's office, right? Because it's consumer protection. So determine essentially what we call, you know, it's what we call in civil right, not civil rights, civil procedure jurisdiction, right? Where is this could potentially land? And then follow up with the person, right? And if it's, you know, a discrimination complaint, say you will, from State Street, right? It's called an individual and say, okay, you see that you wrote this and this happened in your workplace, but can you help us understand more of this, right? Kind of collect information is what I'm saying, essentially, right? And at that point, hopefully we'll have enough information to say, okay, we think that this is, you know, goes to the MCAD. In fact, I've been in conversations with the MCAD and their commissioners over there to hopefully establish a referral system and as well as a way to keep working together going forward. So, you know, if the short version of it is this fits into the MCAD, and, you know, we'll just kind of put a package together and help them push it into the MCAD essentially, right? And the MCAD at that point, hopefully we'll take it from there. If it's an official complaint, and so on to determine what goes on with the case. And we sort of done with that, but certainly the individual can come to us if they're not, getting any feedback from the MCD, if they're still having other issues that come up. So we're going to try to sort of do hand holding, if you will, with people as we go. But a lot of what we're trying to do, obviously trying to get up the, from the ground, it's going to be trial and error, if you will, right? What works, hopefully get input as we get going and let the community know we're here. So depending on what we get, we'll pivot, we'll change, and sort of just make sure that we build a robust, systematic approach to handling issues within the city of Boston.
If it's within our jurisdiction, what's the process?
So as I said before, Councilor, even if it's what we call in civil rights dual jurisdiction, right? Mm-hmm. If it's something that fits in both spaces, right? Say fits in the Human Rights Commission as well as the MCAD, we'll still send it to the MCAD. Well, and as I said to Councilor Edwards earlier, what we are going to hopefully do investigations and lead the whole process is that in the situations that the state or federal agencies do not cover. In the space, for instance, as Councilor Edwards said, with I think parents in pregnant women. Don't quote me on this. I'll have to look at the ordinance again. But if this space is essentially that the MCAD does not cover, we'll lead them. I'm sorry.
Right. I said where we offer greater protection.
Exactly. Right.
Exactly.
So I mean, to be honest, we can get in the weeds a little more about it, but we've drafted sort of like what the investigatory process could be like, what the intake process could be like, but we haven't really gotten into that space as much as we should to some extent. And as I mentioned earlier, one of the positions that's going to again be hired very soon is an investigator who's hopefully going to do a lot of background work to get us up and running in this space. We haven't had to really do a thorough, sort of investigation by and large. We have had incidents come in, I certainly, in fact, we have one right now that perhaps involve housing discrimination where, I've talked and there may be lawyers involved. So I'm talking to sort of different parties to figure out what the commission can do. Do I send it to the MCAD? Do I, there's videos involved. So we're sort of just doing what I said earlier, gathering information to figure out what we can do to help the individual.
Okay, we'll definitely stay in contact with you guys and as your team expands, because absolutely, of course, look forward to getting this fully off the ground. I'm really happy with the additional investments, of course, particularly with the human capital, because the HRC is a game changer in many ways. And then we'll definitely follow up on the credit checks legislation. I was really proud to spearhead that, of course, with Janie as well, and getting that passed the second time around. So we'll follow up, my team and I will follow up just on implementation of that, and we'll stay in touch. And thank you to each and every one of you for the work you do. I see the gavel. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Councilor Campbell. Councilor Mejia and then Councilor Edwards. Councilor Mejia?
Yeah, so I just really quick to Evandro, if you could talk just a little bit to help us understand from the moment that someone logs on and files for support, is there a way for us to track kind of like the progress? Do you keep like is there a way, a dashboard of sorts? I'm always like the dashboard queen. I want a dashboard for everything. Like Elizabeth Warren has a plan for everything. I want a dashboard for everything. I'd be curious just to kind of, if there was a way for us to kind of monitor the progress of something, and if something that could be done more publicly so that there's that transparency. And I guess I'll ask the same thing to Jennifer in terms of just kind of like, would love to know in terms from an accountability and transparency perspective, how are we holding ourselves accountable to these deliverables, and what public facing information exists so that we can continue to improve on those systems?
Thank you, Councilor Mejia, for that question. A couple of things. One, in terms of the dashboard, in fact, as you said, you brought it up a couple of times in the past, but the dashboard in terms of checking the status of a case, to be honest, that we haven't thought that through. I'm not sure how we would do that, except for obviously email us and call us and we'll give you a status, but we are going to come up with a format to track sort of total incidents, right? For instance, we talked about just now about incidents in the AAPI community, right? once we get out there and we're going to be able to track to say, okay, in Chinatown, we saw this much incident about this particular issue, and we saw this in Dorchester, right? So we are collecting data, right, in terms of what we hope to accomplish long term. But in terms of sort of case tracking online, to be honest, that's I'm not techie enough to have thought through that, but certainly something to consider.
Thank you. Jennifer?
Thank you, Councilor Mejia. So when it comes to accountability and dashboards, we are very excited, that we is still in these working sessions with you and Councilor Edward around the ordinance, and there has been internal work, especially conversations on as this work continues with the ordinance, how we can make that possible to have dashboards, and specifically the ones that you mentioned around having multilingual dashboards. So conversations have started to see how that can be created with Do It, and also as well as I know there was also mention of having vital documents lists up and available. And so a lot of that work that, we work together within the ordinance, those conversations have begun to see how we can make things more transparent and more accessible on the website.
Yeah, because the reason why I ask, and before I get the gavel, is just, I just think that more and more people are looking to the city to figure out how we're doing and what we could be doing differently to lean in. And I think the more information that we can share, even if we had 500 calls around this and we were able to address, just high level stuff that by the numbers, I think, or we've had 5 complaints from the BPDA or whatever the case is, that they didn't show up with translation and interpretation. I just think it'd just be a good way for us to measure and to hold ourselves accountable to this work. So yeah, thank you. Looking forward to that. I don't have any more questions other than just thank you so much for all your hard work. These are one of my favorite departments. Oh, and I'm being recorded, so everybody's gonna rewind this and let me think about myself, but thank you for your work.
Great, thank you, Councilor Mejia. Councilor Edwards.
Thank you. You can hear me, right? Not on mute. Okay, great. So I want to give an example of a conversation that happened that had to do with immigration, language access, racial discrimination, and housing. And I'm concerned that none of your departments may have been at the table. And Suffolk Downs, for example, there was the process that was pretty extensive and long and ultimately resulted in immigrant advocates suing the BPDA or filing a complaint, as they would like to say, versus a lawsuit against the BPDA, a city department. And they ultimately settled with HUD, requiring certain language access points and additional meetings and additional, I think, language measurements. So when, as the process or as Suffolk Downs in the next 20 years develops, if there are certain thresholds over a certain percentage in East Boston, that those languages would be available for translating all documents and all public conversations about Suffolk Downs. And so I was not aware, and please make me aware if any of your departments were contacted in helping to come up with, or when the complaint was filed, and then also helping to come up with the mitigation for that complaint. This would be more for Immigrant Advancement and for the HRC. Were either of your departments involved?
Council, great question. So we were involved to the extent when the public meetings were needing to be done to work with helping BPDA
implement the mitigation, right? Exactly. But were either of your departments involved in helping you define it and design it?
No, at least not my department was not.
So that's a concern for me, not that it's for your lack of effort or expertise. It's more of a concern for your department's independence and ability to be able to hold other departments accountable, right? Your colleagues, right, are on the BPDA, and they didn't even reach out to you to help come up with a response to a complaint file that directly involves both of you. That's a concern. How independent you are and how you are able to turn about face and turn to each one of your departments and truly hold them accountable and truly make them rise to the mission of your own departments. And I don't know that that's changing. That's a huge concern. I also wonder, this includes Age Strong, Have any of you read the affirmatively furthering for housing recommendations from the Community Action Committee? Nope, it was, well, let me explain that to you. AFFH is, we just put that in our zoning, but it's actually a civil rights standard that can apply to any and all departments. And it's basically taking meaningful actions to remove obstacles to opportunity. It's a huge lift. It was one finally filled out by the Obama administration, but this Community Action Committee made recommendations for the entire city, all departments. And it's about making sure that we do not enhance, continue, or go on a route of continuing systemic discrimination. It's not enough to just not discriminate, is what it's saying. You have to make proactive steps to integrate, to make our world, our city more equitable. So I recommend each one of you to read the report. We as a city council passed a resolution recommending that the JD administration adopt the report and its recommendations formally. But I think you should go through it, because I think every single one of you could be touched by the recommendations of these activists, of these experts who are looking at civil rights. And there is no part where the city government shouldn't be affirmatively furthering for housing and pushing for equity. And that here you have an entire report on how to do that and different aspects of it. So I just wanted to say that. But again, I think it comes back to the real concern I have of your autonomy and your ability to say to another department, you are messing up. You are violating the law or the ordinance that's created my department. And your ability to do that or inability. I mean, what I can hear and see is you weren't even invited to the table. Here we have in-house experts on language access. Are you invited to the table at all with BPDA, or are you just told what languages to help provide information about or resources for?
Yeah, Counselor, the only thing I'll say is that the pandemic in a strange and incredible way has, I think, started to break down a lot of the silos within city government. And I can just say, you know, my department's relationship with BPDA just has strengthened a lot more. So I think you're right, there's a gap. And I think there's you know, initiative that needs to be taken on BPDA's side, our side. And I think, but I am more confident in that now, post-pandemic, than I was, just because the coordinated leadership forum calls that I know you're aware of really have begun to break down the silos. But great points, and I agree we need to do more work around that.
Okay. And as for the HRC, how is your communication with HUD and their ability? I mean, they came in, they were holding the city of Boston accountable. And I don't know if you even CC'd on the emails.
We're primarily, in terms of any housing issues that we're working with, it's been primarily through the Fair Housing Unit commission that we have. So we have not had direct contact with HUD. Right,
but HUD was enforcing civil rights law, specifically around the exclusion of immigrants through the process. Okay. So I mean, I'm not saying that that's anyone's fault. I just think that, again, if we're moving in silos like this and we have a whole department dedicated to civil rights, there's got to be a baseline. If EEOC, if HUD, if MCAD walks in to hold the city of Boston accountable, you should be CC'd.
That's correct. That's correct. And you know, we're continuing to sort of get up to speed in that space. As you know, particularly coming from you know, state or federal agencies, it's not easy to sort of tell them, you know, include us, right? And so we're treading lightly, we're pushing, and hopefully, you know, as we continue to build capacity, we'll get more and more in those spaces that you allude to, Council. But thank you for your concerns, loud and clear, and I agree 1,000%.
Also, Edwards, if I can jump in too, I think that the creation of the equity cabinet itself, that's the idea behind it, is that we operationalize equity, and we're looking at everything from, you know, policy design, program delivery, language accessibility, hiring, spending, like that. We're looking at all of that together. With my appointment to the role, we've also brought over the supplier diversity work. And so I would love to partner with you and the rest of the council we are developing a way to do that so that
Right.
it's not like after the fact. And also wanted to point out that BPDA has, as a quasi agency, they have their own language access plan and personnel working on that, but we certainly collaborate with them and all quasis on our equity efforts. So just wanted to lift that up.
Well, two things, right? They may have their own plan, but the ordinance is for the city, right? So they need to comply with it. And as we make these updates, they need to also comply with that. And then two, so are you going to recommend that the JD administration adopt the AFFH report that is citywide, that looks at equity within every single department?
Yeah, absolutely. That's something we're reviewing at this time, and definitely I'm working directly with her office on that.
Thank you. Okay. That's it for me, Councilor Bach.
Great. Thanks so much, Councilor Edwards. Okay, and then I've got some more questions, and then for colleagues, I'm going to assume you're all set unless you shoot me a note. So I was wondering, Emily, if you could just talk through that 17%. And again, and yeah, I want to say I got great answers from Age Strong and food access, and yes, we have some written answers, some of which I just want to go over so that the public that's watching can follow along. So when you talk about the 17.1% increase for Age Strong, like what proportion of that is stuff where we're a pass through versus stuff where we're actually like doing a new program?
That 17.1% that I mentioned is specifically on our operating budget. So it is not passed through dollars.
Right.
So it is all, so it's 17.1% of our previous operating budget, which is the city dollars.
Right. Okay, great. Just wanted to clarify that. And I get that the big thing is we're hoping to do a lot of events with our seniors to try to make up for lost time.
Yeah, I mean, that certainly is a part of it, and I think is really important in terms of connecting people. I will just flag one of the series that we've planned is both social engagement, but also to help to support restaurants. So it's really bringing older adults into restaurants for hitting them at times where they may not have as many people there, like the kind of that late afternoon time, and doing kind of an engagement event there where we're also able to support the restaurant by providing lunches.
Mm-hmm. Got it. That's cool. And so it's that, and then there's the hoarding program, which sounds great. And then there's the taxi coupons. And with the special events, social isolation, all of that programming investment, you're hiring a programming coordinator. That's the proposal, right? Is that the only new FTE in this year's budget?
Yep. So we would seek to hire a programming coordinator for that. So there's currently not an FTE included in the budget, but we'll be asking for that. And then for a piece of that work also, we'll be hiring a consultant to help us to get it done. So we've proposed and have been funded for a 4-part series around to bring older adults together to celebrate our cultural diversity in Boston. And we would be hiring a consultant to help us to put those pieces together, just because we have a lot of other work we need to get done as well. So.
Got it. Okay. And just to be clear with the FTE, so the idea is that the money to pay for that programming coordinator is in this budget, but technically you haven't gotten it through the committee that authorizes new positions. And so it's not on the FTE side in the proposed budget.
Correct.
But is that somebody who you would anticipate that being like an ongoing thing?
We would anticipate that being an ongoing thing.
Okay, great. Wonderful. And then the taxi vouchers, I agree with Councilor Edwards, we can't get them back fast enough. I do just want to understand a little bit, and I'm sympathetic to the need to modernize the program, having run around with taxi vouchers for BHA folks quite a bit in my prior job, but what do we mean by modernizing the program? And I guess in particular, sort of how are our folks going to get access to them?
Sure. So I'll say two things. So first of all, we're working with the administration and finance folks to see if there's kind of a partway step we can take this year to allow people to potentially purchase online, or we're just exploring other options for that. Right now, it is only a cash exchange. However, as you know, it's a paper coupon program. It's probably a little bit outdated. Many cities across the country have modernized those programs, going to more of a card-based system or something like that. We currently are working with the Mayor's Office of New Urban Mechanics. There's a consultant engaged that's doing some user testing right now. We plan on taking that data from the user testing, taking best practices across the city, and looking at what kind of technologies we can use to bring the program kind of into the 21st century. So getting rid of the paper coupons, more of a technology-based solution. Within that, it's extremely important for us because we know not everybody has online access, to maintain a piece of the program where people can still purchase who are not online. And so it's complicated because we need to I think make it easier for a lot of people while still maintaining access. And so those are the pieces that we'll be focused on.
Got it. And so our trajectory for that, so there's a sort of in between thing that's starting back up June 1. But our trajectory for figuring out what that looks like is what? Is that something we're hoping to figure out over the full course of the fiscal year, or what's the?
Yep, that's something we're hoping to figure out over the full course of the fiscal year, hopefully start an RFP process and have a further investment in that program in the FY23 budget.
Got it. Okay. But our folks will not be waiting for taxi vouchers for a year.
They will not be waiting, but they won't be able to swipe a card.
Yep, I got it. All right, great. Okay, and then Catalina, and I'm mindful that, again, Food Access sent us a lot of great answers to our questions, which is part of why we haven't asked you enough questions. But just if you could walk me through, so the double up bucks and children's hospital eats thing, we've noticed it, like that external grant has gone to zero across the budget book in like 4 different departments. Like it appears as an external fund, I think also for BCYF and also for something else. And it looked to me from your description, like it's a question of timing, like it's elapsing for the end of FY21 and we're applying for it, but we don't technically know if we're going to get it. Am I right in understanding that?
Yeah, you're right. Both programs, the USDA grant that is help us to support the double up program, and the grant through the Children's Hospital who is supporting the Boston East program, both of them, and at the end of the summer. So we have at this moment enough resources that we will be running Boston East the summer without any interruption, and we actually are looking to host even more sites than previous years. And the Boston Double Lab is the same. The funding is ending in July. We have the funding in our budget and with the new investment from the city to continue the program as it is for the next fiscal year. But we have applied to the GASNIP grant, that is the USDA grant, to expand the program. So if we get it, we're going to be able to expand and support what we have. If we don't get the grant, we have funding that we can keep it as it is for the next fiscal year.
Okay, got it. And in terms of staff, you increased your staff capacity last year. You added this outreach and comms director, right? And that person is continuing.
Yeah.
And then you also added an emergency food coordinator salary, but is that person continuing?
No, the position is the coordinator position is last until August. If this needed, we can extend this, but I feel like by that moment, our food emergency is going to be a little bit sunsetted at that point. because we are transitioning many of the emergency programs to something more sustainable that doesn't require the coordination on our office, or as intense how it is now.
Got it. And I guess my one question would be, that makes sense to me, that transition, but I just want to make sure that, because I think one of our goals with that money last year was to help, help food access in the sort of sheer kind of operational side, just because you guys have been running so many more operations and at such greater scale. And granted, we're moving away from emergency food, but do you feel like if you lose that person, even if our programs are changing, like, do we have the right kind of like logistical support built in for wherever you're going next?
Yes, we when this position sunset, we have the staff that we require to keep the office how it is. And for the fiscal year 2022, we are seeing like more grants, and we have a dedicated person who is gonna be working on that. Yeah, so I feel like our staff capacity without the coordinator is gonna be okay.
Okay. And these community food access grants, this 200,000 that you're giving out to these groups that will sort of hopefully help seed kind of that more sustainable stuff. Who is the staff person who's going to point?
We have a new position that started in November, a deputy director of partnerships, and she will be managing the grants.
Okay, so that is a new position that's starting.
Yeah.
Okay. And I mean, I'm really, really glad to see us doing this sort of safety net programs awareness campaign. I mean, I think, the SNAP gap in Boston, as you know, is huge. And I know it's more than just the SNAP gap, but do we have metrics on like what we would feel like success looked like? I mean, it's a pretty modest amount of money we're putting into that, $50,000. And I guess it would obviously be a huge benefit to the people of Boston if a higher proportion were using the federal funds for food. So just how are you thinking about approaches and metrics on that?
So luckily, we work very close with DTA, and they have a very good dashboard, and they are updating that dashboard on a monthly basis. So and they give us by zip code the information. So we are seeing as that change on that SNAP gap by zip code is going to be our metric for the interventions that we do to close the SNAP gap.
Got it. Do we have a goal there, or just?
So in this moment, we have 71,000 Boston residents that are in the SNAP gap. So we'll be have those 71,000 on a SNAP, but that number change every day. So I feel closing say 0 per people is not going to be possible because things change every day, but we want to see the number going down. And I know Emily from H Strong is also working and have a team member that is going to be working on the SNAP gap in the portion of the seniors. We are hoping that we can do the same with other departments, that they are just putting a lot of effort, working with veterans, closing the SNAP gap among the veterans, and with BPS, closing the SNAP gaps among of the BPS families.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, it strikes me, if we can figure out things that actually work on this, then it's worth more than $50,000 to get it done. So,
we are working with the HHS and other ways that we can do that and maybe bring more funding. But I think that we wanted two tracks intervention. One is PR and education at a city level, and the other one is more hands-on, community level, because that all these benefits that are very personal and very difficult to talk in open settings. So we really want to leverage those relationships that the partners have with the constituents that can do that work and the education and connecting. So we are working in something else, and I know $50,000 is not enough in this budget, but we know that we need more resources, and we are working on that.
Okay. All right. Well, keep us posted here at the council. Because it just seems to me like something we should be putting more into. And then Okay, I think those are my questions for you, Catalina, and then Yusufi. But before I ask Yusufi's questions, my last question for everybody is just, there's a big conversation going on about the federal funding. Obviously, there's a substantial portion of federal funding that is proposed to support this budget, which includes a number of the investments in this budget. So bracketing that, there's sort of other federal funding that's coming down the pipe. And I know that, and that's something that like the administration and the council and the public are all going to be talking very actively about in the coming months. And one of the things that everyone's agreed is like, oh, well, the departments that are close to our constituents, to Catalina's point, right, might have some instincts on what are the things that like people really need, whether we're talking about direct grant programs to people, right, in certain situations, or we're talking about work that we do in the city, but that might need to be scaled up more. So, you know, without asking anybody to go put a number on something that, you know, they haven't cleared with OBM or whatever, it would be great for me to, and I think for the public to understand like kind of some of the, like, if there's anything that's in the hopper from the perspective of what your department sees on the ground as we have those conversations. Cause I think that the public and the council, you know, would appreciate having that perspective. So if everyone thinks on that, I'm going to go to Yusufi. Yusufi, can you just walk through a little bit for those watching what the like personnel expansions were? I mean, you talked about your team going up, right, last year, and if there's any this year, and then kind of similarly, just in big buckets, the sort of the increases on non-personnel stuff.
Yeah, happy to. And I just want to say that all that money should just go to Immigrant Advancement, by the way, coming from the government. So just that's my plug. No, joking. In FY 2019, which I think when I got here, we were at 5 FTEs. Within that fiscal year, we added 2 more positions. This last fiscal year, we added 3 more positions. And this future fiscal year, we're going to add 1 more position. And so we're going to be at 11 total. Did you want me to walk you through?
Can you just speak specifically? So because this is a little bit of a looking backward, looking forward hearing. So the 3 who we added for FY21, and then what the position is that you're proposing to add for FY22.
Yeah, so the 3 that we added for FY21 was, and I may be getting this wrong, it may have been in the past fiscal year, but our comms manager, or communications manager was one of them. The second person was our constituent services coordinator, which was really great because what used to happen is each one of my staff used to have to do 5 hours of constituent services. So now that we actually have a full-time person focused on that, it's actually increased capacity in a whole other, for the rest of the team. And then the third is the economic integration specialist. And as I began my opening comments, I mean, we're really starting to look at recovery and long-term recovery. And so they're going to be really focused on increasing immigrant wealth and wages. And then the future one, if this budget is passed, is going to be an immigrants lead full-time coordinator. Last year, we had a contractor do that work. We're turning that into a full-time position so that we can expand the ILB program to do much more alumni engagement, as well as grow the program out to be able to be in Spanish as well as Haitian Creole.
Got it. And the contracted services that are doubling?
Yeah, so contracted services is a bunch of that was a $250K from BPD that we got, right, which we've exhausted, through this year. Really the rest of that is accounted by our additional investments that we're asking for this year.
Got it. Okay. And the kind of on the number under goals in your thing where it says like, you've 500 immigrant serving organizations have been connected to resources to better serve their constituents. That's 500 touches, right? Not 500 different organizations.
Yeah, it's 500 sessions. Actually, we did the numbers, probably more like 900, because what we've been doing is these biweekly webinars. Our attendance, we've done, I think, so far 30 of them in the last year. And we have anywhere between 30 to 50 different community organizations on that. And frankly, it's an undercount because we're continually talking to our community organizations. My staff is on almost a daily basis. So we're not even counting those pieces. We're just counting kind of the webinar pieces.
Got it. And sorry, can you remind me again? So the foreign trained immigrant professionals pilot program, which seems exciting, is that something where is the goal like for us to have like, basically, I feel like with workforce type stuff, I always have to ask like, what's the piece where we connect people into an actual job? Have you talked to OWD? Do we feel like these hosts of the internships are going to hiring people? Like, what's that last? Because sometimes we do job training and support, and then that last piece where somebody gets, over the hump doesn't happen.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, this model that we're building off is a tried and tested model. So it's the Welcoming Center in Philadelphia has used this model. Some other cities have used this model, and so that's why I was excited to pursue this piece. We're definitely partnering with OWD. In fact, they're paying for the stipends for the half of the stipends for the internships that would be placed. And we're also in conversation with our area hospitals. So Boston Children's, for instance, has absolutely expressed interest. As you probably know, there are labor shortages in the medical industry. And so, so this would be internships. In the pilot, it's going to be focused on the medical field. And we feel like there's a really good shot at it's going to lead to a job. Because that's kind of the conversation we're having with and ABN, the African Bridge Network, is having with these employers. Definitely the goal is to do, for people to get a job. And look, that's why we're doing the pilot. If it's not going to do that, then we're going to scrap the idea and figure out another way of doing it.
Got it. Okay, great. And the Immigrant Lead Boston, I obviously had the absolute pleasure of speaking at the graduation for that program, and it just seemed like a fantastic cohort. What was the learning from that in terms of, so we're bringing the leadership of it internal rather than contracted? Is there anything else about it that's sort of shifting from the pilot go around?
I mean, I think, just to give you a quick sense of the impact of it. So before the program, 50% of participants agreed that felt like they had some trust in the city of government. After the program, that went up to 90%. And 4 participants expressed an interest in running for city council. They're probably going to start coming after your jobs, which I'm happy about. At least 2 of them expressed also, interest, actually more than 2, in joining city boards and commissions. The areas that we did identify some improvements, and this is what I want the Immigrant Leads Coordinator to work on, is we were given feedback that there could be more sessions actually, because folks really enjoyed them and learned a lot, about city government through them. We had a civic engagement project that was part of this, that it was a capstone project that, we didn't feel like led to the results that we wanted. So we need to experiment with that part of it. And then there's also clear in the evaluation piece, just thinking about how to integrate strategies to increase the participation in public meetings, so that to ensure participants become more civically involved and understand. So how can they be part of city council's hearing as part of the program, which we didn't really do. And then obviously it's just how can we do a Spanish speaking cohort and a Haitian Creole cohort and kind of build that pieces out. And BU is the one that was doing our evaluation for this. They're our partner on it. So those were the findings. And that's what we wanted the ILB coordinator to focus on.
Great, fantastic. Okay, so now round robin, any ideas on categories of things that feel like they could use expansion as the city thinks about federal funding?
So I'll just, share. First of all, I just want to say that really excited that Chief Byers Milner is, leading the equity cabinet, because I know she is front and center in these conversations. And I think what I'll just say from our kind of perspective is that there are certain things that worked really well in this crisis that, as long as we continue to be in a crisis around COVID, I think are going to be important pieces to continue. So certainly the basic needs assistance that we provided, which was a form, and frankly, in some ways of providing cash assistance to our immigrant residents. I hope there's a way to continue doing that as long as our communities our immigrant residents aren't able to get back to work, right? And we know there's going to be a period of time for that, particularly our most vulnerable. Legal needs, I think, is another piece that is really, we've seen our calls just really in the department grow on that. We're delighted that we're putting $100,000 into Greater Boston Immigrant Defense Fund. But I always feel that there's more that can be done to that before that. And then just the last thing I'll say is that I think we need to continue looking long-term at, how do we build wealth in Black and Brown communities and immigrant communities. And, I think we got to try different things and then scale up based on that. And that's partly what, our budget is trying to do this year. But I think the more kind of ideas we can figure out like that, I think are going to be really important as we try to recover from this.
Great, thank you.
I can go. So, Councillor Buck, I was mentioning the SNAP and outreach. I think that's one of the things that we want to make sure that we can do is connect people with their services and decrease the stigma around the services and provide correct information so everyone feel like entitled to do it. So that's one of the things what we want to do. We want to try to find ways that we can increase like food sovereignty, people be able to grow and get the food that they deserve and they want, and also provide all these spaces for healing through this time. Other thing that we would like to do is keep giving power and resources to the community to execute the responses that they are more appropriate for them. So we wanna push that forward, and also we want to be able to support better our immigrant population and working with Yusuf very closely, because they are the ones who can now qualify for any of the safety net programs. So that we are putting a lot of effort to make everyone on the SNAP, but we still have a pocket that doesn't qualify for that and needs support. So we're gonna try to like move forward with some of those initiatives. And I think that's the idea that we have so far.
Great, thank you. And I saw Emily, Commissioner Shea unmuting, so.
So I would just add digital equity into that conversation. We recently partnered with a bunch of other departments around the Digital Equity Fund, where HStrong was able to add $150,000 to the pot. So we're giving out $250,000 in grants, but we had over $2 million of applications. Grant applications. So certainly there is a big need out there in the community, and we had 99 organizations apply for funding, which I think is just fantastic and just shows the breadth of people out there who want to be helping other folks get access, which is great. I would also add just access to programs as we work with UMass Boston to look at equity in the city. It's really clear that a lot of good programs exist, but that the access to those programs, the understanding of people that programs exist and they can actually get access to them, and then how they kind of make that leap into getting access to the program, that piece we do need to work on. And so I think that that is a potential area for investment. We certainly are looking at social isolation and any creative things we can do around social isolation to break down barriers. And I'll just add, as we think about this, about funds, we will also be getting additional American Rescue Plan Act funds into our office, and we're certainly also looking for ideas. We're awaiting guidelines on what we can use those funds for, and that will certainly make the conversation about what we do with them a lot easier. But looking at that, and then in terms of aging services, as we think about funds, as certainly the increased FMAP for home and community-based services, there's really a lot of conversation going around on that in the community. So lucky that, you know, funds are coming in from a bunch of different places. And I think we have to think really holistically about which funds are appropriate for which pieces of need for older adults in our community.
Great, thank you. And just, sorry, Emily, in terms of the funding that's coming that's tagged for Age Strong, I know you said you don't have the guidance yet, but is it, what proportion of it do you think is sort of like pass-through money? Because again, I know you're the area agency, so aging. So like, how much of that is sort of like for our partners, those 24 organizations, to do more of what they do, versus how much of it is kind of something that you're gonna have to make a proactive programming decision about?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of it will be passed through, but I think as we look at, you know, having CARES Act and then having this funding and the regular Title III funding, I mean, it will all be Title III funding, and we can make an ask of Elder Affairs in terms of how much we keep in-house and what we keep that in-house for, and what we use that on in terms of putting it out through grants. So we have to stay within certain guidelines, but I think, you know, I think there's lots of conversations ahead, because, you know, we'll pass money out for if our partners have good uses for those funds. And there's a certain point in time when they'll have to expand the types of things that they're doing in order to be able to utilize the funds in a good way. And so I think unlike the CARES Act, this next investment is we're really going to have to be thoughtful about making sure that they're spent wisely.
Yeah.
And not that the CARES Act wasn't spent wisely, so that's not what I'm talking about.
No, but CARES Act was like, oh my gosh, there's all these emergency things on top of us, like we're dealing with them. Yeah. And this is more like, yeah, there's more strategic need to, yeah. What is the top line number for Age Strong stuff from ARP? Do you guys have that?
We don't have it yet.
Okay, really? So because we have the rental relief side and we have the sort of direct city aid side. So you guys still don't have the.
No, we don't have it. Elder Affairs is waiting on guidance from ACL. But I'm anticipating that it will be probably double. It will probably double the amount of Title III funds we typically get.
Mm-hmm. Which is what? Sorry, I'm not familiar.
4.5.
So you
around 4 million.
Okay, so you usually get around 4 million, and now you think you might get 8 or maybe 9.
I think I mean, there were large investments on the federal level, but those funds come to us very specifically in buckets. So like
exactly,
there'll be a lot of money that goes to home delivered meals, and that program across the city has increased by 40% since the start of COVID. So that's, you know, that will be well used. There'll be another big investment in caregiver funds. And then there'll be a smaller investment in Title IIIB, which is really our more flexible pot of money, where we can look to. We just did a needs assessment, so kind of look at those needs, have some conversations, and be a little more strategic about where we use those dollars.
Great. Francis, did you want to add anything?
No, she has everything under control.
All right. Fair enough. Well, thank you. And yes,
Yeah.
I think there will be ongoing conversation with the council about all that, but that's exciting. And I assume, Emily, that I shouldn't be too worried about we did get slightly concerned about sort of I mean, Catalina referred to the sunsetting, but the kind of, you know, seniors who are still getting the weekly groceries and who, you know, that might go away in the future. Like, kind of, how are you thinking through that piece?
Yeah, so that program is sunsetting. So the last week for weekly deliveries is June 14th through 18th. And we've already talked to buildings that are getting the building drops, and Catalina's office and my office and HHS are about to start to call about 1,500 older adults. There's another set of about 400 that our ASAP partners will be working with, because they already have ASAP services. So we will be working to connect people to other existing food resources, and also listening for what those gaps may be as we call through people and as we look towards how we spend future funds.
Okay. Well, I just would say, I think that's going to be an important place for, you know, if there's a tranche of that where people really still need some kind of support, right? That's where we all want to spend money, because while we've had this hearing, the governor has announced that the emergency is going to be officially over in Massachusetts as of the 15th of June, which is a day after your sunset. So, you know, but we all know that people's lives don't follow these date lines. So just really want to be mindful of that in any way the council can help. All right, we're running down the clock here, so I'll go to Jennifer and then to Evandro if you've got any thoughts on that federal funding question. Jennifer, do you have anything?
I am all set. Thank you.
Okay, great. And Evandro, did you want to say anything on the federal funding front?
I'm all set as well, but I do think that, you know, equity, digital divide that Emily highlighted, used to be highlighted, funded to try to build wealth, you know, to reduce the wealth gap is important. The other one that maybe no one mentioned was housing. Housing is a big one, right? So a lot of funding hopefully towards that, but that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. And Chief Barrios Milner, before I gavel us out, and I do also have to check for public testimony, I just wanted to see if you had any final words.
No, again, thank you for your focus on these issues and for lifting up the work of these small, but as you have all noted, very mighty departments. We really appreciate the dialogue and your support, and really look forward to moving forward with expanding our services in the new fiscal year with the increases in the budgets that we've gotten. So as you know, we've talked about language accessibility, the complaints process for the Human Rights Commission, supporting immigrants throughout the city of Boston. So all of those services and programs are needed now more than ever. So just appreciate your support in expanding and continuing to collaborate on this work.
Great, excellent. Well, thank you. And thank you to the whole team. And thanks for sticking through a long hearing and being patient as we asked all of you questions. I really do appreciate it, and very much all the work that you do. So I just have to check. There's a Natasha in the waiting room who might be part of somebody's team, but might be a member.
She's our chief of staff for the Equity Cabinet.
There we go. So we won't be taking public testimony from Natasha. Yeah, so then it just remains for me to, again, thank you all, and to say that this hearing of the Boston City Council's Ways and Means Committee is now adjourned. Bye, everyone.
Take care. Thank you, Counselor. Great seeing everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor.